Welcome all to the 27th of February 2023 Council meeting. I open the meeting at 7:03. I will now pass you on to the Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Alison Beckwith, who will read out the formalities.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi everyone, this is an ordinary meeting of Council. My name is Alison Beckwith and I'm the Chief Executive Officer. Tonight's meeting is being held in person in accordance with the provisions of Council's governance rules and the Local Government Act 2020. The meeting is also being live streamed via Council's website and Facebook page so that people can tune in from home. The live stream is not interactive. Any comments or private messages directed to us while the stream is live will not be presented to Council or have any bearing on tonight's meeting. Council's request to speak methods continue to allow participation of our residents without having to attend tonight's meeting in person. Please note that any public questions submitted to tonight's Council meeting will be read out by a member of our executive leadership team and a verbal response will be provided. Questions and responses will also be included in the meeting minutes following tonight's meeting. Council does not accept questions as part of the request to speak process, and no statement may be derogatory, defamatory or directed to an individual, councillor, member of staff, ratepayer, resident or member of the public. A 2-minute time limit does apply to all request to speaks. The timer will be used and a warning will sound at the 1.5 minute mark. And we do ask that you sum up for the last 30 seconds. And if indeed your statement is being read on your behalf by an officer, they will sum up. Public participation, engagement and submission to Council is a key part of Council's governance rules and for community members to exercise a fair and democratic right to engage with Council in a respectful manner. If any members of the public gallery depart the chambers while the meeting is still in progress, we do ask kindly that you not hold conversations with others just outside in the foyer. Noise from the foyer area, both outside the chamber and downstairs, does actually impact on our live stream. So I thank you in advance for that. I will now introduce you to the councillors that are in attendance tonight, and I will start to my left. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Leda McKern, Councillor Tom Malikan, Councillor Peter De Morales, Councillor Alison Champion. And to the councillors on my right, the Mayor, Councillor Peter Castaldo, Councillor Fiona Mitsonikos, Councillor Rick Gorotti, Councillor Elizabeth Neely and Councillor Mark De Pasquale. This evening we are also joined by the executive team of Council, and I have Mark Gilio, Director of Corporate Services, Natasha Swan, Director of City Development, Kath Brackett, Director of Community Wellbeing, and Darren Bennett, Director of Assets and City Services. Also here tonight supporting Council are members of the Governance and IT team, and we have our fabulous Jets crew who are coordinating our live stream for tonight's meeting. We thank you for participating and we hope you enjoy the meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alison, and welcome again. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the acknowledgement of the traditional custodians. Our meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and on behalf of Banyule City Council, I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians. I would also like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung elders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders elders joining us today. Next, I'll read out the inclusive Banyule statement. Council is committed to and values diversity within our community. I will now read out the Banyule diversity statement that demonstrates our commitment. Our community is made up of diverse cultures, beliefs, abilities, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders, who are committed to access, equity, participation and rights for everyone, principles which empower, foster harmony and increase the well-being of an inclusive community. We now move on to apologies. Are there any apologies? No, we're all present tonight. Confirmation of minutes. Confirmation of minutes for the ordinary meeting of council held on the 6th of February 2023. Can I please have a councillor to move and second? Councillor Malikan moved, seconded Councillor Mitsonikos. I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to disclosures of interests for councillors. As required at any other meeting of council, councillors must declare a conflict of interest at the start of a meeting and leave the meeting when the item is present to council. Councillors will be required to leave the meeting and return when the item has been resolved. At any point throughout the meeting, if any other councillor recognises that they have a general or material interest, they can flag that at that point and follow the same procedure. Are there any disclosures of interest? No. There are no disclosures. I now move on to disclosure of interest for staff. Officers that are present, I now ask whether you have a conflict of interest in any items presented before council tonight. No, there are no conflicts of interest. I now move on to the agenda papers. Tonight there is an urgent business item. I believe that there may be an item of urgent business to be admitted for tonight's meeting. I am seeking a motion from a councillor to allow council to admit a matter regarding Montmorency Community Hub, current financial and operating situation into urgent business. The motion pursuant to Chapter 2, Part C, Division 3, Rule 19 of the Governance Rules states that council resolved to admit the Montmorency Community Hub current financial and operating situation urgent business item onto urgent business as listed in the council agenda 27th of February 2023 for council to consider at this meeting. A councillor will need to speak to why the item is urgent and cannot wait until a further council meeting. Before council considers the actual motion below regarding the Montmorency Community Hub, the council needs to first ensure that they have resolved to move the general business item, hence the motion above. We have a mover, Councillor Champion, and a seconder, Councillor Garotti. I now ask the mover to talk to the reason for moving this to urgent business.
So now, I'm happy just to contribute as the seconder because I think the mover's looking to speak to the substantive item if it's endorsed by council.
Please go ahead.
But the rationale being that this council received, I suppose, correspondence and a representation from the Community Hub regarding their financial situation. It is quite dire from what we understand, and they are in need of immediate financial support, and they've made a representation to council on that basis, as well as to the state and federal governments. Given the urgency of that as expressed to us as a council, we've taken the view that we can't afford 3 weeks, that we need to bring it up as urgent business tonight so that council can then, if endorsed, promptly provide a report back for consideration by this group. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Now that we are in urgent business, I call for a councillor to move the motion for council to consider. Motion urgent business motion Montmorency Community Hub, current financial and operating situation. Can I please have a councillor to move and second that? Councillor Mitsonikos and Councillor Garotti. Apologies. Councillor Champion moved and Councillor Garotti seconded. Would the mover wish to speak to the item?
All right, so just confirming I read this out first. Yeah. So the urgent business motion that Council note the urgent and current financial and operational situations of the Montmorency Neighbourhood Cooperative Limited, trading as Montmorency Community Hub. Write to the Australian Prime Minister, the Victorian Premier and relevant local members of Parliament seeking their urgent financial commitment to support the financial viability and sustainability of the Montmorency Community Hub as a three-tier government responsibility, noting Council's commitment to equal funding of this potential venture. Note that Council's consideration of financial support is subject to an equally shared financial commitment from other levels of government. Request a report from officers on the advocacy outcomes regarding the equal financial investment on this matter via the other levels of government, including the verified property valuation and any future capital investment required to operationalise the site. Point 5, due to the urgency of this matter, request the report is to be presented at the Council meeting for the 20th of March 2023. So moved.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to speak to the item now?
Thank you very much, Mayor. I will very briefly speak. So this item actually comes off the back of some of the co-op board members met recently with federal, state and local members. These meetings were held just to advise the status of the co-op, both financially and operationally. So it was just keeping us in the loop with what is happening. I'd actually like to thank our invested community. I'd like to thank our officers, my fellow councillors for all the consideration of this urgent business item over the last week, and we obviously hope to achieve support from all levels of government for this community asset. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll just chime in to say that, look, obviously with this resolution now we'll be writing to the Australian Prime Minister and to the Victorian Premier, and those letters will go out in your name. So that is a very big thing from this council to do, having a letters go from the Mayor to the Prime Minister and the Premier. I think that shows the significance that this council places on getting to the bottom of things very quickly with those levels of government. We, as a council, obviously will receive a report back on the financial implications of an investment, but certainly Councillor Champion has done an enormous amount of work talking to us, advocating to us, discussing with officers around whether council could support. And, you know, the emerging view is that yes, potentially yes, but it can't be us on our own. We just don't have the funds. We need state, we need federal to step up. And so hopefully this kick-starts the process. Letters will go out tomorrow, signed by the Mayor if this is endorsed. And really, you know, for those from the community listening in, we want you to know that council's behind you, council's supporting you. Let's get state, let's get federal behind this. Let's hopefully make something happen, but we really need the other two levels of government to come in behind us and the community if we're going to achieve an outcome here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor McKern?
Thank you, Mayor. I too wish to acknowledge the hard work that Councillor Champion has been involved in with her community on this project. It was a difficult one that was discussed amongst councillors last year, and at the time council was unsure about supporting this project for a number of reasons. it needs to be made clear that council's support is reliant upon the support of all three tiers of government. It's a big investment, and for council to go it alone, particularly in the current economic climate, could cause quite a hardship to our financial position. So while I support all three tiers of government working together on what has been identified as a worthwhile project for the community, the money required could be an issue, but we keep our fingers crossed and hope that all three tiers can work together towards a Monty community hub that is financially viable. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No? Okay, then I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 2, petitions. 2.1, objection to consultation and proposed expansion of draft residential parking permit policy 2016. There is one speaker to this item. We have Roger Fife will address the council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. Roger, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Mayor, I am for the petition and against the recommendation. The petition highlights how the Transport and Environment team failed to explain substantial changes to the Banyule community that affect parking permit applicants. They also failed to involve councillors in developing the revised 2022 policy. The draft policy fails to manage traffic in parking precincts across Banyule. Petition signatories have discussed their concerns with me. A council letter to some residents omitted important details while promoting parking opportunities over alternatives. Yet council's local road hierarchy puts pedestrians, bikes and public transport as top priorities, not more parking permit spots. The policy also fails to respond to new business models, such as hire car firms parking on residential streets, classes of vehicles and attachments ineligible for permits. You have to wade through the draft document for a list of exclusions. This petition's detailed list shows it impacts across Banyule. The 2022 draft policy is not fit for purpose. It requires a comprehensive review and new exhibition period with proper publicity. In adopting its 2016 policy, councillors set strict conditions for any future review. Councillors, the future direction of this 2022 policy is now in your hands. Were you consulted in preparing the 2022 draft? The 2016 process was based on principles. 1, that any review should be treated as a fresh policy. 2, councillors be consulted in the preparation of the policy. 3, reference to provision for a review deleted in the current policy. The problem is process. If you follow the recommendation, councillors, please take control of how you deal with it. Thank you. And I'm available for any questions because you've got more information at your disposal than I could provide in 2 minutes. You know that.
Thank you, Roger. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Councillor McKern?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, Mr Fife, I'd like to commend you on the hard work you've put in. I believe that contrary to the report, which indicates 25 signatories to the petition, there is indeed 128 and counting. Is that correct, Mr Fife?
It's actually 168.
160 at the 27th of
168.
February. 168.
And verified
counting.
by the governance team.
You've obviously put a lot of hard work into the draft residential parking policy, examining it and also speaking to residents about it. So once again, thank you for that effort and also for keeping the councillors informed. Given what you're asking, and I believe what you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr Fife, is for a revised strategy and further community consultation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. And my reason is that the staff have oversimplified the consequences of you adopting the 2022 draft policy. The magnitude of that simplification and an attempt with all the communications to lull the community across Banyule into a false sense of security that nothing is happening, that is the real crux of the problem and why I have focused on the councillors taking control, as they did back in 2016, when they increased the number of parking precincts in Ivanhoe. They split them up because they didn't want people travelling across a larger precinct. There is no
Mr.
justification.
Fife, we hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
and thank you. Just briefly, should council honour your request, and we look to achieve it, i.e., more community consultation and a revised strategy? What are the finer points that you would wish to achieve that you feel the strategy currently lacks? Just in bullet form, if you would, Mr. Fife.
Yeah. Basically, to number one, publicise to the community the full implications of the 2022 policy. It's a glaring omission. Number two, to acknowledge that proposals like increasing the list of users that are ineligible to apply for resident parking permits for 10 classes of vehicle, which are recorded in the petition, but you have to spend a long time wading through the draft strategy to find those 10 points. And number three, to do your job as councillors, as the 2016 councillors, only 3 of whom are still members of this council, that you exercise the same degree of control in the process that those councillors did, and they unanimously adopted all the amendments that they put in and made quite clear that they wanted any review of the 2016 to 2020 policy. They wanted any review to
Thank you, Roger. I
start
think,
as first principles.
can we wrap up, please, very quickly?
Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you.
Started
Thank you.
as first principles, and to treat any review as a new policy.
Thank you very
for
much,
your
Mr.
questions.
Fife. Unless there are additional questions, Mr. Mayor, on the part of other councillors, I would like to foreshadow an alternative motion, just given what the Speaker has stated.
Yeah, thank you. Look, just quickly, I've got 136 signatures. I'd like to make sure that we get this right this time. Is it correct, governance, that we have 168?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was the number that we had at the start of the meeting, but if there are more, please, Roger, let us know and we can take them into
Just
account.
simply 168.
Noted, thank you.
Wonderful. All right. And so there is an amended recommendation. Councillor McKern, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It refers to point 2, that council refers the petition to the Transport and Environment team for consideration and response to the primary petitioner and council. Number 3 notes that since the original petition was received, additional 100, I think an amendment's required there, is it? Should be 168?
Yes.
Signatures have been submitted and received by council.
confirming
I
through
think
you.
it would be an
correct.
additional 140, Councillor McKern, because it said in the report.
Well, there was the 128, there was the 28 and then an additional 140.
32,
correct?
additional 32.
Yes, so could
Additional
we just
100.
revise that 136 to 140?
We can make that amendment.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Unless you really wanted to make it succinct and say giving a total of 168 at the end of that point. But I think that's really nitpicking. And that 4, advise the primary petitioner of the outcome of this resolution. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor De Pasquale? As mover, Councillor McKern, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. With regards to parking and parking policies, those residents in particular who live in highly affected areas, such as, for example, around schools, are going to feel the brunt of any changes or any reviews to our parking policy. So I take these concerns very seriously, and I also think that the concerns raised give weight to a notion that is being discussed by council at present. I think I'm safe to say place-based planning. And that is that what's right for one area of the municipality may not be right for another. Over the past few months, Mr Mayor, I've had a number of meetings and discussions with residents living around Ivanhoe Primary School, and they noticed the brunt of parking and some of the poor traffic and congestion occurring in their local streets at pick-up and drop-off times. So issues such as hockey sticks being painted in those affected streets that allow residents to still exit and enter their driveways might be a consideration for our policy, whereas residents who live 10 streets away wouldn't benefit from hockey sticks. So I think we need to be sensitive to localised solutions when residents are affected by particular parking issues. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. As seconder would like to speak to the item.
Mayor, yeah, just quickly to add that obviously this petition and signatories are of the area here in Ivanhoe. There are a few points there that need to be addressed. But some of the things in the petition that I was reading that does apply to everyone in our municipality are things around policies on car sharing, so go get cars, camper vans, trailers, all those types of things. And I'm interested to see how they're going to be dealt with through this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Malikan.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I took it on board. I actually spoke to you at the consultation meeting we had downstairs, and you raised many of those points that day. But as you stated, the world's changed, and share cars are now well, not that prominent in Banyule, but they're certainly growing in Banyule. And the desire for those companies to have a prime spot compared to the desire of the residents to be able to park out the front of the house is certainly a conflict we'll have to deal with, and that, I think, this policy should deal with that conflict. But also on-street parking is a very valuable resource that's in high demand. We give it away for free, and the demand is increasing and the supply certainly is not increasing. So we need to be very careful and don't want to end up in a position like some of the metro councils where they have 3 times as many parking permits as they do parking spots. So it's a delicate balance, and we need to make sure that people have access to parking close to their house, but we also need to make sure we manage it in a way that everyone has an opportunity. And when you're talking about trailers and caravans and boats being parked in streets for months on end, it's hardly fair on the neighbours to do that. And also, you often see trailers parked on nature strips and they're padlocked to the nearest tree, which makes the visual clutter of that, I think, is appalling. So there are several things we do need to consider in this policy, and I thank you for your efforts to highlight those, and it's something we've discussed and we'll certainly make sure is included in any final outcome, and happy to discuss it with you again anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Grotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So sometimes with these things, it's very valuable to go out and site and have a look at things. And I've certainly gone out and had a bit of an inspection myself, and it's helped to crystallise some of the issues for me. We've already foreshadowed to officers some of those suggestions now that are arising from the community around carve-outs for certain streets, how to deal with those vehicles picking up on Councillor Malikan's comments. So I suppose officers perhaps now understand where the community is coming from and how councillors take that community feedback very seriously. Obviously, we'll have a recommendation come to this council, and all I'd suggest to interested community members is if that doesn't reflect where you think things need to be, that's where the conversation can come with us ahead of a recommendation being finalised and tabled. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? No, I'd just like to acknowledge that we've got an example here of where a community member has taken every opportunity to prosecute their argument along a consultation period. This is a petition tonight. This is part of the feedback that will be considered when we do the parking strategy in its entirety when it comes back. So I'd just like to note that you've definitely got your point across. With that, I would like to move all those in favour of the motion. I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 3.1, Banyule City Council submission of motions to the Municipal Association of Victoria. There is one speaker on this item this evening. A written statement will now be read out on behalf of Chris Chappell by Natasha Swan. Chris is speaking for the recommendation. Chris, Natasha, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, this is a written statement on behalf of Chris Chappell. Local Food Connect is a not-for-profit community group which operates across North East Melbourne. We encourage, support and promote events, actions and enterprises which strengthen the community's ability to produce food locally, whether at home or commercially. Local Food Connect commends this motion. Our local food growing regions have already shrunk substantially and is vital for the future health, sustainability and food security of our community that our food bowl is protected. We ask councillors to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I will now call for a motion. Is there a mover? Do we have a mover? Do we have an amendment? Not on this agenda item, I think, Councillor Melican. Do we have a mover as per the papers? Councillor Melican, second, Councillor McKern. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Yeah, just briefly, there's MAV, very important organisation, does a lot of very good work navigating on behalf of the 79 councils right across Victoria. I'm currently on the board of the MAV and I think we benefit enormously from their input and from their knowledge. And this is all about the State Council, which is coming up, and councils put up motions that they think are important and passionate about, and they think they want to try and influence the way the MAV strategies are developed and also how they advocate to the state government. And this is all about us influencing those outcomes. And I think it's very good that Banyule's engaged and has put forward some very good motions, and I'll look forward to the debate we'll have at State Council, and we'll be doing my best to make sure that the MAV supports these motions. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. As seconder, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Melican on being the MAV representative for this council. He puts in an enormous number of hours representing us, and our substitute councillor is Councillor Neely, who helps Councillor Melican out when he can't attend a meeting, although I think you attend most of them, don't you, Councillor Melican? As Councillor Melican has mentioned, Mayor, advocacy to state and federal government on behalf of our community is a significant part of the councillor and also council officer workload. And we advocate to the Municipal Association of Victoria on state issues affecting local government in relation to all Victorian councils. So I'm delighted that we're putting up 7 motions that cover a range of areas that we're working on currently, including the urban food strategy, which Councillor Alison Champion initiated as a motion, and protecting our urban food bowl, particularly in light of a recent pandemic and future shocks and emergencies. Affordable housing, that's hot on all agendas, all government agendas at the moment. How does it concord with neighbourhood character, which is an important consideration for our community? Do the two need to be mutually exclusive, or can we regard them as mutually concordant? That's all I've got time for, but as you can see, there's a series of motions here and we councillors are available to discuss them if you would wish. A lot of thought's been put into them, Mr Mayor, and I'm really happy to be seconding this.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak to you? Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And it's a comment, but probably more a question for Councillor Melican as our MAV Director to reflect on. But just, reflections, and not necessarily tonight, but how effective the advocacy of the MAV actually is. Because I must admit, over the years, there's been policy after policy that's been detrimental for the sector, and I don't really hear from the MAV. And I don't really see the advocacy on those key issues. And one of the most pressing ones that we're confronted with now is potential opportunities being denied to local councils to be entrepreneurial around land rezonings and having to bear that tax just as a private developer would. Well, we know that had council had to borne those costs years ago on the school sites, Belfield Community Housing, Belfield Social Housing, Belfield Social Enterprise, none of that would have happened. So not to be negative, it's a great item and I'll be supporting it, but I do think it'd be great for our MAV Director to come back to the group and with an honest appraisal around how the MAV is actually going in terms of advocating for the sector. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Neely.
Just briefly, I hope that these motions are seriously considered and that steps are taken to ensure that there are actual practical strategies and that are in place, for Victoria and particularly for Banyule.
Any other councillor? You may have a right of reply if you wish, but I'll just chip in. There are 3 very brief ones that I'm very supportive of tonight coming. Electrification, sometimes an impediment is upfront capital cost, and I think it's important the state government get behind councils and other authorities to decarbonise important community assets. Secondly, gas, water and electricity services going in new buildings and covering up a significant proportion of frontages, particularly in activity centres. It's very detrimental to the overall frontage to shops, and that's a concerning item that many councillors across the state have spoken to me about. Third is glass bin. 4th bin, does everyone want a 4th glass bin? I don't think so. Another motion we're going with is that all glass should be added to the CDS process and for deposits, part of the container deposit scheme. I shouldn't use acronyms, apologies. So those are 3 that I'm very passionate about and we're taking to the MAV. Would the mover like a right of reply?
Just briefly, I had a conversation with Melissa Horn a couple of weeks ago, and this is certainly an issue the MAV's relationship with state government hasn't been what I would hoped it would be. We are working on a bit of a reset since the last state election, and Melissa Horn is the new local government minister, and she's also the Minister for Casinos, Gambling and Liquor Regulations, which is interesting given what's going on with gambling and this council and other councils' advocacy in trying to reduce the harm from gambling, but also she's roads and road safety. So, and that's what we discussed at a recent MAV function. So MAV is working very hard to try and reset the relationship with the state government, and I think the upcoming elections will be vital because we'll potentially have a new president and very shortly have a new CEO. So I think that will be an opportunity to reset that relationship, and hopefully we can get that working a lot better so that we can benefit the same group of peoples that we both serve between the state, federal and local government. So I take on Councillor Grotti's comments, but it's not from a lack of trying from the MAV's behalf, I can tell you.
Thank you, Councillor. I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move to Banyule City Council submissions of motions to Australian Local Government Association, ALGA this time. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you set out by the papers, but I am under the impression that there is an alternative motion being moved.
We do. Would you like
Councillor?
me to read that at this stage, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor? In relation to the recommendation, point 2 is what we're looking at. Note that the additional motion to be submitted to ALGA, which is the Australian Local Government Association, regarding the urban food strategy, that this National General Assembly calls to the Australian Government to prepare a strategy that provides for a resilient and sustainable national food secure Australia, able to provide for access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to its entire population at all times. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder? Councillor Champion. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier we had a member of Local Food Connect express his report, Chris Chappell. He's been a fantastic member of our community reference group for these motions. And I just want to say that in relation to the urban food strategy, what we're looking to do is address the fact that while Banyule is doing its part at local level to try and provide for a food secure future, we've just been through a pandemic, will happen again, future shocks and emergencies. We've seen what our supermarket shelves look like when they're empty. How important is local food supply to us? What is happening not just at our level, at local level, but also at state and federal level? Do you know that we do not have a national food security policy? And that's probably why we've always taken our food bowl for granted, being a developed country. But the pandemic has highlighted that we can be as food insecure as any other nation, and that we have to do a lot more to prepare for future shocks and emergencies. And that's the reason, Mr. Mayor, we're looking to promote this motion. I might just say too that it can often take years of work, thousands of hours of volunteers to make change happen in a society. And when that change does happen, we think, oh wow, well that was quick, when indeed it's worked on a lot of hidden hours that people have been unaware of. And so that's what it often takes. People like us working hard, advocating, community members like yourself, councillors like ourselves, before change might be realised in years to come. So all this work that we're doing, Mr. Mayor, I believe is worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. There's just one thing I will add, just off the back of the fact that, yes, we have had empty shelves over the last 2 years. We are now dealing with an increase in cost in food that we purchase, no matter whether we purchase it from a market or whether we purchase it from a large organisation like Woolworths or Safeway. Sorry, I'm from New South Wales. Safeway, Coles or Aldi. Costs have gone up and it's impacting people's back pockets, their wallets, as well as various other day-to-day supplies. Having sat in on recently, just before Christmas, on an urban food strategy meeting, if you like, it was actually supported by sustain.org. So it's an organisation that's designs and builds sustainable and healthy food systems and encourages all communities to be involved in growing food, sharing food, and bringing communities together through food. So this is something that both Councillor McKern and I are very passionate about, because we're aware not only the cost, but also food is a basic. Not only a basic for us to live and be alive, but it's also a basic to keep communities together. So it's a very important one. So I will absolutely be supporting this motion this evening. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Malikan.
Yeah, I will say a few things. Yeah, it's interesting when some of my colleagues talk about food security, and we look at the discussion going on in New South Wales about franking the new gas projects versus the food production, one of our most productive food bowls in Australia and indeed the world, and the concerns there and the lack of any policy or strategy to guide that, and you know, the value of food production and the implications if we get it wrong. And yeah, so it's quite important that we do try and influence this. But the other thing I would say is the Australian Local Government Association, which we're a part of through our membership with the MAB, has managed to get the Australian Council of Local Government running again. So that's an organisation that regularly used to meet with the Prime Minister and ministers and representatives from the ALGA and mayors to try and have that influence at a federal level. And it's just been announced that the Australian Local Government Association, which conference will be on the 13th to the 16th of June. Following that, there will be a meeting with that council, and the Prime Minister will be attending. So the Australian Local Government Association conference will be targeted, or will be focused on that meeting, and it's a rare opportunity to have that sort of influence with the Prime Minister and Minister. So I think I'm quite excited to actually go to Canberra in the middle of winter this year to be part of that. It will be a wonderful opportunity, I think, and it'll really lift local government's profile and give us a real seat at the table. So that's a fantastic outcome, I think, and something we've also at the MAB we've been pushing for a long time as well.
Thank you, Councillor Malikan. Do we have any other speakers? No? Well, I'd just like to note that there are two motions going to ALGA, Australian Local Government. One is around electrification, which goes to why do we need fracking? We don't. And secondly, the food strategy. And we advocate through many different ways, and tonight we have someone from the office of our federal member here, and I'm glad you're here tonight to listen to our propositions that we'll be coming to ALGA with. With that said, I will now move the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move to item 3.3, record of councillor meetings. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Is there a mover? Councillor Neely. And Councillor Champion seconded. Does mover or seconder wish to speak? No. Any other councillor? No. I'll then put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 3.4, advocacy 6 monthly reports.
I have a question, Mayor, just a quick one.
Yes, Councillor?
Just reading the report on the Lead the Link response to the campaign, I noticed there were 1,500 residents who responded. I just wanted to know if there was an update on those numbers to or the CEO or
Could we have the
director?
appropriate director please respond to that? Or CEO?
Thanks. Through you, Mayor. The number at the moment, as of today, is 1,873 because we've been processing some hard copy submissions that have been coming in through the postcards. So quite a significant number in support of Council's position.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. There is officer report set out on the agenda papers. I will now call for a motion. Councillor Neely. Seconded. Councillor Champion. As mover, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out that 25 advocacy priorities is a significant undertaking for council, as there needs to be thorough evidence-based research before we adopt these. And just from asking that question, the community are particularly engaged with the Link campaign. So if I got that right, 1,873 responses. And, you know, that's a really strong indication of the impact it's having to people in Banyule. Residents, traders, and a variety of community groups. To make change in these spaces, council needs external support as well as funding, that in-principle support. And these changes to move forward with the needs of communities, the changes are enormous. And just to mention, you know, a summary of the report, the electrification of buildings, solar installations, and the work involved to meet carbon neutrality has to come from federal, state and local together. Encouraging employment is a priority, social housing is a priority, better transport connections is a priority. So these are all what we're advocating for, and it's much needed, not just for Banyule, but for the wider Melbourne community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the seconder like to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. Just very briefly, just a thank you to our officers who do a lot of work behind the scenes to ensure that our community is looked after and represented at all levels of government. So thank you very much.
Any other councillor? Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just acknowledging that advocacy is often done in partnership with our community and with our traders, and just acknowledging, and there's an item later tonight, but our traders in the room from Watsonia and led by Jeremy Richards, the President. So a lot of the great advocacy outcomes that we have achieved have been in collaboration with the traders, so thank you. And I think, from my perspective, and Councillor Neely did a terrific job there of listing advocacy priorities from council to other layers of government, around climate change and jobs and infrastructure. I think a really big future area of advocacy that we're going to need to step up in is on cost of living, and where we need other layers of government to work with us now to help address these issues and challenges in the community. So I'm really looking forward to beginning to have that conversation with the CEO and with the advocacy officer, and what we as a council now and advocacy can start doing to tackling the cost of living crisis facing our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? No, I'll just note that it was the past Mayor, Councillor Neely, and the CEO that often leads advocacy on behalf of council, and we've got a very significant package of materials we can now take to advocate to all the different areas that we are partnering with. And as the new Mayor, I've had the opportunity to go to a few of these sessions. Tonight we're hearing from the first 6 months of the 2022-23 year. So these are advocacy positions we've taken last year. There's been a lot happened since then, and we will be reporting that in the next quarterly report. So with that, I would now like to put the motion, all those in favour tonight. I declare the motion carried. We now move on to our inclusive and connected community. Item 4.1, Banyule Scout Grants Program, Year 2 report. There are 2 speakers to this item tonight. And I think we're going to reverse the order of the speakers tonight on request. We have firstly Abdiz Mohammed will address the council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Abdiz, please take to the lectern. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, councillors, administration of the Banyul Council. Always say thank you very much. And it is my honor to stand in front of you tonight. My name is Abdulrazak Mohammed. I live in Harabeg West for the last 30 years. I'm Honorable President of Somali Voice Victoria, Incorporate, a local organization established in 2020 to support the Banyul Somali Australian community, helping these people fulfill their potential. Somali Voice Victoria strongly endorse the Council's proposals to invest ratepayers' money to support Banyul Scouts. Somali Voice Victoria has a program in waiting to actively develop a cohort of male and female Somali Scouts in conjunction with Heidelberg Scouts. We Somalians recognize the very positive benefit of young Somali Australian if they can be trained as a young leaders and ultimately Scout instructors in the future. That's why Somali Voice is seeking funding from Banyul Council through its budget process and helpful funding from the Scout Victoria to recruit and support 10 Australian Somali Scouts candidates. We fully appreciate the generosity support of this Council for Somali Voice Victoria since our startup and understand the principle of crawling before we walk. We believe that we have reached a level of administrative and operational maturity and good governance that Banyul Council may consider funding our Scouts program via special grants on the next round of the budget building. In conclusion, the proposal before Council tonight is warmly received and appreciated and will benefit Banyul youth in an immeasurable way. Thank you for your kindly. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Abdiz. We now move on to the second speaker, Kevin Hill, will address council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Kevin, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'd like to endorse what Abdi said here tonight, but I want to speak from a personal perspective. I have seen and experienced the benefit of Scouts in my own family. So I have 3 grandsons who have been through the Ivanhoe Sea Scouts and reached Rover level. And every one of those boys has flourished as a result of that experience. So I cannot congratulate you more than say this is one of the most fantastic opportunities that you can undertake to support Scouts generally. We just think it is fantastic. And having said that, we understand that the Somali Voice Group does have a program, a nascent program, to put 10 Scouts forward and train them, Somali Scouts, train them through that program. It's been enthusiastically embraced by Scouts Victoria and certainly through the Heidelberg Scouts. And what Abdi was saying was, look, you know, we understand there's a shortage of capital, but Somali Voice sits in waiting, ready to take on the opportunity to recruit those Scouts, train them. Now, this has huge benefits to our community, to our society. It has economic benefits, it has social benefits, it has anti-criminality benefits. Everyone benefits by seeing Scouts flourish. So I endorse the program and congratulate the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Mayor, can I just ask a question?
Yes?
Possibly of our speaker. I'm a bit unclear. So the $40,000 that is possibly being allocated to the Heidelberg Scout Group through this process, is that part of that 10 Scouts that have been programmed? And if it's not, is that program going to be submitted to the public budget submission process?
Is that correct, Mr. Abdiz?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's true. And second, I want to add it one thing. 2 years ago, we submitted our draft community, which was 6 points. And one of the major points was is training the Scouts. So that's I said yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? All right, we have a motion before us on the papers. Do we have a mover? Councillor Garotti, seconded by Councillor De Pasquale. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very happy to speak in favour of this item. And I think back to, it was the previous term of council now, and with Councillor Malik and Councillor Champion, and I think a real advocate for this was Councillor De Pasquale, where we identified that there was a real gap in funding arrangements for the Scouts, because they often lease buildings, that they own the buildings on council land. And so they weren't benefiting from all the upgrades that all of our other clubs and community groups receive. Scouts Victoria is quite cash strapped. And so we identified the need to step in and also to use this as a basis for advocacy and co-funding contribution from Scouts. But that's $100,000 every year. And I think we're beginning to really see the dividend of that investment pay back. Our Scout groups right across the board are growing from strength to strength. The CEO and I were out at Bundoora Scouts. I mean, that at NJ Talfa, that has transformed from just a couple of years ago. Hundreds of kids now going through that program. The whole site and facilities are upgraded. And what's really pleasing and inspiring is when you hear the stories of how the Scout group is finding ways of subsidising and in some respects fully covering some of the kids that are coming through their program from troubled families and from tough situations at home. And you just wonder what an impact the Scouts is having on those kids and giving them the opportunity. So that's what it's all about. This program obviously is a capital contribution to facilities, but really excited to hear from our two speakers around, you know, the Somali community looking at how Scouts can benefit them and their young leaders. And really positive to hear that a budget submission will be coming to council on that front, because we know, as I said, just what a great benefit that Scouts has. And obviously, you know, to be able to extend that to our multicultural communities, I think could present a terrific opportunity for this council. So well done to all, and yeah, very happy to endorse this recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, congratulations to First Eaglemont Scouts, 10th Ivanhoe Scouts and Heidelberg Scouts for being the recipients of this grant process. Originally, this grant process was put in place to possibly look to get further funding from whether it be state government and or federal and or Scouts Victoria. So this grant process was initially started as a bit of a seeding project to have a secured amount in the budget, and I'm sure, and I still think the councillors of this council are sympathetic to Scouts and the organisation and everything that it does. But imagine if we could have this seeding money there in the years going forward, and officers and a district commissioner and, you know, state parliamentarians can get together and let's pull. Council puts in $100,000 of ratepayers money, and then they can draw $200,000 or even $300,000 of state money, Scouts Victoria money to or match projects. So we saw there was a bit of a gap in upkeep, and, you know, as we see with regards to recipients today, there's building works and toilets and things like that. They need to be somewhat matched funding. Otherwise, if they're not, we may as well move this through the general public submissions of the budget, and we should be hearing from each individual Scout group of what they need and what allocation they need. So this really needs to be a trigger to activate those in the community to start talking to state members, federal members, because we know that, you know, basically to do Scouts, every child that is doing Scouts has to pay an annual subsidy of over $400 a year. Now, some are subsidised, but that's a fair bit of money going into an organisation. And I think we should see some back here in Banyule. So this is a perfect opportunity to get our officers onto that job. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the item? Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank our community speakers for congratulating the works, acknowledging the works that have been done, and also the benefits that they've seen throughout their own families, and the potential benefits for other members of the community who may not have been involved to date. The Scouts have been going for a long time, and I hope that they continue to in the future. It's a holistic program that teaches children, teenagers, very useful practical life skills, and we need as much of that in our community as possible. Also, I think the mover and seconder have raised salient points, which I don't need to repeat. I really just also want to put the shout out to community members to approach their local councillors with regards to their scouting facilities. I know I was approached by First Eaglemont Scouts, and to see that the money has been allocated to improving the safety and usage of the undercarriage of the building really makes my heart sing because the situation was dangerous there. So I think the Scouts are actually really good, Mr Mayor, at articulating what needs to be done. And it's good to see a lot of the leaders are very practical people, informed, engaged. And so when they approach us, they usually have a pretty good handle on what they need the money for, and they also have a good handle on what the costs involved are. So it's refreshing to be approached in that manner, organised, effective, coming to us for practical solutions to their problems that we can help with.
Thank you, councillor. Do we have any other councillors wishing to speak? No, so I will now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 4.2, Advisory and Population Committee's report, November 2022 to February 2023. There are no speakers to this item this evening. Councillors, there's an officer report before you set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do you have a mover? Councillor Neely, seconded by Councillor Melican. Does the mover wish to speak? The seconder?
Yeah, I've attended several of these meetings and always find it very interesting. You learn a lot. I think we have some great advocacy committees, and particularly the population committees, because we have a bunch of volunteers who are, well, very knowledgeable. Some of them are very experienced, some have had senior roles in government, some have had senior roles in industry, and they willingly share their knowledge and experience. And yeah, you learn a lot from these people. So I'm very happy to continue with those population committee. I think we had a planning day for the Age Friendly about a month ago, and that was extremely useful. And council, I think, benefits greatly from hearing from the residents, particularly residents that are so engaged and so knowledgeable. So yeah, happy to receive this report, and yeah, we really enjoy being a part of these committees.
Thank you, councillor. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the item?
Mayor, if I may, just a question of the appropriate officer.
Yes.
Just trying to deal with point 5, in that council endorsed the Age Friendly Committee would like for their terms of reference to be changed to enable the current number of community members to be increased from 12 to 15 members. Just as the appropriate officer, what is the process?
Could we scroll down to item 5?
If we were to endorse such a process today, does that lock us into something that we are now moving into terms and references, etc.?
We'll just get that up on the screen. So
I think while you're doing that, I asked this question because I would like a separate report, I think, maybe, to come to this council and the community also, rather than just moving it through such a manner.
look, are you seeking to make an amendment? Oh, sorry. Question to the officer.
I'm happy to take the question. Councillor, the council adopts and endorses the terms of reference for the committees, and the age-friendly committee in the terms of reference just referenced 12 members. The committee have met on a number of occasions and have felt that 15 members would mean they could have more participation because they have actually great participation at that committee. So the process is to seek council support to amend those terms of reference to reflect that recommendation from the committee.
Sorry, Mayor, so further question. So does this then reflect that all our committees now will have terms of reference changes going from 12 to their 15?
My understanding is that the other committees currently do have 15.
That's not my understanding. And if that is the case, how then do we control or measure the recommendations coming to us from our committees when they want to make changes to the terms and reference? How do we keep this fully into the public eye of what's happening so that they can be engaged as well?
So, Councillor, any recommendation from the committee comes to council and is considered by council. Council's not required to support. The committee's asking council to consider supporting it. Council could determine not to support it.
Yeah, so my question, Mayor, as I think I was probably not clear enough, does this point 5, does myself supporting this point 5 then support a change to the terms and reference for the age-friendly committee?
Yes, it does.
And Mayor, sorry, just further question, final question. Is that the appropriate process under governance and terms of reference?
My understanding is that it is, because the terms of reference were initially adopted by council. So in order to make a change to the terms of reference or a material change, which this is because it's about membership, it would need to come back to council.
Sorry, question last point 5. Then does this terms of reference or does a change like this have to go to community consultation, because the terms of reference have to go to community consultation before we make a decision on them? Sorry to be difficult, but I just want the public to have full ownership and understanding of how our committees work. Yeah, I've got some questions about changing the terms of reference. Got nothing against the age-friendly committee. I love the work that they're doing, but if we start to bring recommendations to council meetings to change terms of reference like that, it's never going to stop.
I'll throw this one over to the CEO to respond to.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. Council has a couple of choices here. One, you don't need to do community consultation for a change of reference, but to a change of the terms of reference. However, if council does choose not to endorse the recommendation by the age-friendly, they could call for a report to be tabled to understand if there's an impact and what the impacts to that going from 12 to 15 would be and how that compares to the other committees. So tonight, councillors, in front of you is a situation to endorse a request by the committee to increase by 3 members, but council could move a motion to call for a report to consider that.
Mayor, may I please move an amendment, that point 5?
Just before you move that, we have another question from Councillor Grotti.
Yes, so, and this might help inform what you decide to do, Councillor, but my understanding, and it's a question through to appropriate officer, was that there is a review, there's an annual review of all the committees in terms of references, and I believe that review as well was going to look into the question of remuneration for committee members, and I just wonder, and picking up on Councillor Di Pasquale's perspective, is that from an office, the appropriate time to do things in a holistic way rather than an ad hoc through, what's essentially just noting minutes. So, well, I suppose that's an observation, but just seeking an officer comment as to, yes, is there a report coming on the committees and remunerations? Yeah.
Could the CEO please?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. There is a report coming on both those items, on the annual review of the committees and their outcomes, and considering remuneration of those committees as well.
Would you like to make an amendment?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to be comfortable if I don't, and just would like to bring it to the attention of that review that's being done. Nothing against it, but I just think it should go through a full review and a full discussion and debate. So if we could have point 5 reading, I can't see it, but we'll have to be referred to acknowledge the age-friendly committee, the age-friendly committee's
Point
appetite.
of order. Do we not vote on this item first? Because we've moved and seconded.
I can answer that if you like.
To
Mr. Mayor.
governance?
Through you, the due governance process is that consent would need to be sought from Councillor Di Pasquale, from both Councillor Neely and Councillor Malacan as the mover and seconder of the original motion as to whether they would like the change.
I'm happy to keep the motion as is.
And the seconder? As is? Okay, so we need to put the, Councillor Garotti?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So just a procedural question then, because I agree with where Councillor Di Pasquale is coming from. Should the council then wish to move an amendment where we would note the age-friendly committee recommendation and refer it to the review process, would that mean, what is the government, by voting against the officer, I'm foreshadowing an amendment. So does that mean we can vote against this and then vote on the amended resolution?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and to respond to you, Councillor Garotti, should the motion that's before council now be lost, you can put forward an alternate motion that council can consider and vote on accordingly.
Thank you for
So,
that.
Mayor, I'm sure it won't be lost because I'm sure there's enough support as it is, but I'll just ask the mover and the seconder whether they would reconsider changing maybe point 5 so that it does get put through that review process in a more formal way.
Second go. Mover? No? Seconder?
The terms of reference will be, a review of the terms of reference will be incorporated in that review now. So what changes? The only difference is that my understanding, and I was at, when it was discussed, there were several members who wanted to join subcommittees. That's why they wanted the extension, the increase in numbers. And these subcommittees were working on very specific items and planning for very specific events, and that's why they requested an extension of the numbers. So if we don't allow that extension to happen, then those subcommittees won't be able to be formed.
Thank you. So we've got a foreshadowed motion, but I'll put the recommendation as is per the papers. All those in favour? I'll move them. Oh, yes. Do any other councillors wish to speak to the item? No? So I now
And I might sum up. Can I sum up?
You may sum up.
I moved. Yeah. So with this, councillor committees make recommendations to councils through a thorough process. These committees are meeting all differently, but, bi-monthly, every 3 months, and a lot of time is spent with community members making these decisions. These decisions then come to council, and tonight is about moving these committee reports forward. So I'd like to keep this as is. However, note my fellow councillors' points for a further discussion. Thank you.
All right, we now move on to, I will now put the motion as per the papers. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried.
Mayor, can you please ask who those opposed?
Apologies. And those opposed?
I'll call division, Mayor.
All right.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, would you like some support with the division calling?
Look, I'll call a division, and all those in favour of the motion as per the papers, please stand up. Thank you. And all those in opposition, please stand up. Thank you. I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 5.1, NJ Telfer Reserve, long-term electricity power requirements for solar and buildings. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do we have a mover?
Yeah, I'd like to move per the papers.
Councillor Garotti, seconder. Councillor De Pasquale. No, Councillor De Morelos. Apologies. As a mover, would you like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So this came up as a report in response to a notice of motion that I raised. And in putting that forward, that notice of motion, very much seeking the genuine advice of officers as to what could be done at the reserve. Very pleased that officers have come back and said that there is support there for a power upgrade. Obviously, through this recommendation, we'll refer it to the budget process as is appropriate. And I think there's a few items tonight where there's budgetary implications where we will refer to that process. But I think that's a good outcome and an acknowledgement that because of all the community use facilities there, and in particular, I believe Bundoora Preschool, and an expectation from the state that hours of use will be increased there because of the expansion of early childhood education, that the whole site is power constrained. So this power upgrade will enable those sorts of things to happen which are imminent in the future. And obviously then one of the side benefits will be that Bundoora Scouts, if the power upgrade goes ahead, has been a massive advocate of community solar for this council. And to be honest, Chris, he was meant to be here this evening, Chris Parr, the president, but they had a Scouts weekend. So he's obviously a bit, that's a big weekend for them. But he was instrumental in advocating, and that group advocating for council to do our community solar rollout, where we'll roll out panels and we would save organisations recurrent cost on their solar panels. In a sense, he was a pioneer, and that group was a pioneer for that initiative. So for us, potentially in the future now, to be able to go back and say, look, we can address the power issues, solar can happen in NJ Telfer, we're future-proofing the site, we can partner with state government, we can deliver the expansion of early childhood education there. I'm really excited about this, the potential of this recommendation, and would certainly commend that to the group. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the seconder wish to speak? No. Any other councillor like to speak to the item? No? All right. I now then put the motion. All those in favour? Against? No. I declare the motion carried. We'll now move on to item 6.1, Ibbotson Street, Watsonia, proposal to place permanent barriers, consideration of submissions. There are no speakers to this item this evening. Councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do we have a mover? Councillor Garotti, seconded. Councillor Neely. As mover, would you like to speak to the item? Councillor Garotti.
Well, we're waiting for the ward councillor, but I'm happy to speak to the item as the former ward councillor and very invested stakeholder. So this is the process now to around submissions on the closure. Obviously, no one who has submitted is here tonight, or at least registered to speak. But council did receive, I believe, in the order of 7 submissions. Is that correct, Chief Executive? Thank you. And so there was mixed feedback there. Obviously, some of the residents who live on Ibbotson Street, are concerned about the loss of amenity for them in terms of the easier access it provides. But generally speaking, the overwhelming feedback that I've certainly received from the broader residents in the area, from traders and community groups is that there's real support for the Watsonia Town Square concept, which is also on tonight's agenda, and a core element of that is the road closure to dramatically simplify that intersection and to make it pedestrian friendly. So, we think on balance this is the right decision to do, but obviously there's a process there around the road closure that will continue to progress through council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
No, just to commend the thorough community consultation during this process. Thank you.
Would any other councillors like to speak? Okay. Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Councillor Neely, for stepping in. Really appreciate that. I was on the next agenda item already. Sorry about that, Mayor. I would have moved this, but thank you, Councillor, for being were the previous ward councillor for this area, so thank you very much for your continued support of residents, businesses, etc. in this location. You would remember the test that happened a few years ago with regards to the closure that was done for about a 6-week time period. So it was a trial, and during that time, I believe council staff, ran separate events in that area. One of them was learning how to skateboard and all these different types of events for family members and kids to get out there, and it was really well attended. So much so that I still get people mentioning it to me. Oh, when are we having another one? This is the opportunity to take back the roadway. This is the roundabout here where this street comes out to the Watsonia Centre. There's 5 streets coming into it, and there's a car park coming out onto one of those streets. It's a really messy. It's a messy intersection. So to be able to tide it up by making this road closure and reclaiming that roadway into open space, I think is very well supported by the community. Thank you to the former Councillor Garotti for continuing to support that, my fellow councillors as well, and the wider community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak to the item? No? With that, does the mover wish to write a reply? No? All right, I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 6.2, Northern Trails 2022, Northern Trails Strategy Refresh Endorsement. There are no speakers on this item this evening. Councillors, there's an officer report before you, as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Melican, please go ahead.
A slight change to item A that I'll read from there. Reprioritise the main Yarra Trail action by moving action number 4, upgrade the service of the existing trail from Banksy Street to Yarra Street, to action number 1, bridge across the road, and B, substitute action 9, bridge across the Yarra River from upgrade service of existing trails to Banksy Street to Yarra Street, action to the top 10 annual priority trail improvements. Sorry about the confusion way that's read, but I was told that's the only way I could do it. Sorry. So basically, we're moving the upgrade of the main Yarra Trail from Banksy Street to number 1.
Thank you, Melican. You'll get an opportunity to speak to that.
Mayor, if possible, if I may offer to the mover, point 1A would be that council reprioritise main Yarra Trail. I think that would be more appropriate.
It's just being amended. We'll be right back with you in a minute. Are you comfortable with that? Right, so do we have a seconder? Councillor Di Pasquale. As mover, Tom Melican, would you like to speak to the agenda item?
Yes, thank you very much. This is a great initiative started several years ago. All 6 northern councils are on board. A very good advocacy document that has enabled us to leverage some funding to date. But I've always thought the biggest weakness in the whole trails network right across Banyule is the fact that from the Banksia Street to Burke Road North is a gravel path It often floods. It's very heavily used. Walkers, joggers. It's also part of the artist trail, and there's some conflict points there as well. And basically, most cyclists will not ride the Main Yarra Trail because this section is so damaging to bikes. It's also often flooded, and yeah, it's the weakest point by far of the whole Main Yarra Trail. And we notice all the other work. If you read the document, they're talking about upgrades to the Banyule Trail, which leads directly to this, the Plenty River Trail, which leads to the Main Yarra Trail. All the paths that the North East Link proposing to develop all lead to this section. As the new bridge, I don't think the new bridge is number one, is that they've already committed the money to build it, so I don't see why that would be our number one priority. But this new bridge leads directly to this section as well. So, and we can also look at currently the other end of the Main Yarra Trail in the city in Collingwood, the Gibb Street steps, the 40 steps there are finally being removed with a ramp, and they're also doing changes at the Chandler Highway to remove the 70-odd steps there, and also get rid of the pipe bridge. There's so much work being done on the Main Yarra Trail, and yet right in the middle of Banyule we have this section that is virtually unrideable during the wetter months, and it really just detracts from the whole youthfulness of the whole Main Yarra Trail. So I think it's important that that's done. And, we can look at the benefits of cycling. We can all the mental health issues that people face, all the physical health, the obesity crisis, the congestion on our roads. Like, what is it? For every dollar spent, there's $8 returned in health benefits. And then we read recently about the 10,000 people it's estimated that died from air pollutions right across Australia. Petrol's $2 a litre, roads are congested, parking's a massive issue. Why we don't spend more to make cycling a safe and an alternate option right across Melbourne is beyond me. I noticed the state, New South Wales government has allocated a significant amount of money. It's my opinion only, I think big roads are actually working against active transport right across this city. So it's important that we get this document right. It's important that we advocate, because the benefits are enormous. And it's something that I think the state and federal government should get on board, and it'll be something certainly I'll be raising at the ALGA meeting. So, happy to support this tonight, but with that small change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Yes, just briefly, Mayor. I was riding the Main Yarra Trail yesterday with the family. We were going through this area, Councillor Melican, and it has been forgotten about. There's still the tyre ruts all the way through the track from the wet weather that we had months and months ago. And it's not granitic sand anymore. It's pretty much just compacted dirt. So the first decent shower we get is just going to be mud and slush, and it's just going to go really, really soft. So it's just been forgotten about. It's not something that we should have. With the ability of our trails, etc., we're better than that. I think we need to be promoting them to, visitors and for health and getting out into the outdoors. But if the conditions are somewhat raining or something like that, I would never go down there during the rain or a rainy day. Whereas other go down the Plenty River Trail, I'd go down there on a misty rainy day. So it's a change that we need to make. Thank you, Councillor Melican, for bringing it on board. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to the item? Councillor Neely.
Yeah, this project has a lot of community support, and I guess when people are using these trails and they're not safe, they're finding alternate ways to get out with nature. But just to highlight, like similar to the report earlier on advocacy, there is an enormous amount of work to be done on, getting the missing sections of trails connected, extending the trails, upgrading pedestrian bridges, and improving signage as well, so people know where to go if they're on their trail for the first time. And even the amount is enormous, 7.7 million for Banyule's top 10 priorities. So it's such a very valuable strategy, and I endorse this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? No. I now then put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 6.3, East Ivanhoe Streetscape Delivery. There is one speaker to this item. Could John Sanderson from East Ivanhoe Streetscape Upgrade Community Reference Group please come to the lectern? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, councillors, our Chief Executive Officer, council officers, members of the community present here in the chamber and watching online. Canon John Sanderson, the Vicar of St George's, East Ivanhoe. I rise as a lay member of the Community Reference Group of the East Ivanhoe Streetscape Delivery Project. I thank the officers for the process of consultation to date, and I speak generally in support of the papers before council this evening, save to encourage officers and particularly council to continue the consultation and engagement process with the community to ensure timely delivery of appropriate proposals. I strongly encourage council to work towards implementation of proposals in financial year 22-23 and to resist the temptation to continue to move delivery of this important project for East Ivanhoe into financial years 23-24 and 24-25. I encourage the officers on behalf of council and the community to explore the possibilities of a number of provisions. First being an additional raised pedestrian crossing between the junction with Burton Crescent, Warncliffe Road and Lower Heidelberg Road, so protecting the most important crossing for our children walking to and from the local state primary school. To also explore the possibilities of working in partnership with local organisations for the provision of public toilets, and to continue to work with businesses and residents to achieve an effective mix of parking and improvements to the streetscape and Lower Heidelberg Road. I remain available to take your questions should you have any.
Do we have any questions for the Vicar?
Thank you.
No. Thank you. I'll now call, there is an officer report before you as set out on the agenda papers this evening. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Garotti?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Happy to move, but with an amendment. So points 1 and 2 as is. Point 3 refers the funding shortfall to the 2023-24 budget process for consideration. And point 4 understands, or probably better worded, notes the current budget is an estimate only and there may be future additional amount to be allocated to achieve the vision and strategic outcomes for the centre. The amount will be ascertained once the project is tendered later in the year. A separate council report will be prepared as part of the tender award. So moved.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder? Councillor De Morelos. As mover, Councillor Garotti, would you like to speak to the item?
Yeah, just briefly to note, as we're doing with a few items tonight, just referring funding matters through to the budget process. And actually with the President of the Traders in the gallery, who happens to also run an optometrist, I was quite impressed with myself that I could still read the writing even though it went smaller. So I don't think I need to see you anytime soon again, I hope. But that's all I have to say, Mayor.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? No? Then I'll take the opportunity. I'd like to first thank John Sanderson for coming in this evening. He's been an instrumental partner with council, working through a very extensive consultation period with the Community Reference Group, along with other community members. And there has been a tremendous amount of work done with the community to implement a placemaking strategy. This would be the first time that we start to implement a broader strategy at one of our key community meeting places, an activity centre. It's absolutely vital, East Ivanhoe, is we take that every opportunity is taken to consider the biggest strategic long-term proposition that we can make East Ivanhoe Village everything it can be. Originally, a budget was allocated to this over 5 years ago. Since then, there has been a very large increase of costs, and so no doubt a project like this and its importance will require additional funding. And I'm very supportive of that. And there is a final closure with a community reference group that we absolutely need to do. Some of the members of council that were guiding us along that journey have left, but we need to pick it up and continue that consultation. Some of the important things that weren't reported in the report this evening were raised by John Sanderson, and I think they really do need to be thoroughly discussed with the community reference group as we close off the consultation with the community before we go into the detailed design work. That said, I will now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 6.4, Planning and Building Activities Report, July to December 2022. There are no speakers on this item. Councillors, there's an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor McKern, and a seconder? Councillor Di Pasquale, would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the officers for the half-yearly report regarding Council's planning and building activities. It is important to receive these reports regularly, as planning matters are not only important to our community, but planning actually does play a significant role in shaping the livability of our city. Consequently, we as a council need to understand both our community needs and commercial trends and respond strategically. In this report, Mayor, two standout elements occur for me. Firstly, the decline in Banyule BPI. Banyule BPI, or otherwise known as Banyule Building Permits and Inspections, is the business arm of Council's building surveying unit, and profits have declined over recent years. So this may affect future implications regarding delivery of this service. You'll be aware, Mayor, that the building permit process was privatised in Victoria in 1994. There is now the choice for applicants to engage a private building surveyor to issue building permits over council services. Consequently, this has driven the decline in councils issuing building permits and focusing more on their statutory services, such as making sure that people's swimming pools comply. Important to note. The second item, and I may just run a little bit over time, Mr Mayor, if that's okay, is the increase in number of planning application decisions being overturned by VCAT when refused by council. And I know, Mr Mayor, that this is of interest to both our councillors and community. This is up, if you'll refer to the graphics, from 40% decisions being overturned by VCAT in 2020 to 60% of decisions being overturned by VCAT in 2023. When council or council under delegation to officers refuse a planning permit for an application, it is with considered evidence-based reasoning, important to understand. Decisions to refuse a permit are not taken lightly. Non-compliance with strategic priorities and statutory rules that are embedded in the Banyule planning scheme are considered as part of the assessment process, as are resident objections. While I understand that VCAT may place different weighting or interpretation on the more subjective or descriptive local policies, like neighbourhood character, it remains vitally important, even more so, that VCAT continues to hear Council's views on planning matters of local import.
Could you please wrap up in the next 30 seconds?
Yes, this is important, Mr Mayor, so I would appreciate the time. as acceptable planning changes can be made in the VCAT review process via consent orders. So what I'm trying to get to here for us to understand is that though we actually do put things, refusals, we do actually represent refusals at VCAT and hope that VCAT will abide by our refusals. The fact that they may not and the fact that there's an increase doesn't mean that changes aren't being made to applications. And this is an important means of validating a preferred outcome to the original application. It's also important that objectors continue to register their concerns and seek reviews of planning decisions. Being visible and expressing a voice is a fundamental part of the planning process, particularly in relation to VCAT. Now, through you, Mr Mayor, I just would like to seek commentary from the Director of City Development in relation to how many applications we determine each year and how many are then appealed. Thank you.
Could the officer please respond?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The Planning Department makes in the order of 1,518 decisions every year that could be subject to an appeal. So they relate to primary decisions to determine planning applications, amendments and other statutory decisions. Of those decisions, I note that in the 21-22 annual period, we had 48 appeals to the tribunal. And of those, many were resolved by consent order. I don't have the exact figure for that. But as a percentage of all of the decisions we're making, you can see that it is an incredibly small percentage of decisions. And the majority of our decisions that we made are made by our officers with our interpretation of the planning scheme and upholding the policies and strategies as we understand them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Swan. So thank you, Mr Mayor, for that opportunity to speak a little bit longer. I know how important planning is to our community, and every opportunity we have to explain how the system works is important because it's very complex.
Thank you. Do we have would the seconder wish to speak to this item?
Yeah, Mayor, that's myself. Not speak on the item, but I would like to get a bit of a gauge from probably the appropriate officer, maybe. Being contacted by community members, they're always saying, their concerns are overdevelopment. So I just want to get a bit of an idea of, do we have the right balance? Are we overdeveloping? Are we doing appropriate developments? Where are we headed over currently and into the future? Thank you, Mayor.
Could we have the appropriate officer please respond to that question?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Probably a difficult question to answer in the context of not having a specific example before me. Our current policies have been in place for a number of years, and as councillors are aware, we've started the process of reviewing our housing strategy and our neighbourhood character strategy, and both of those will help us to test that very question as to whether the balance is in fact being achieved. I would say from my perspective, I possibly receive even-handed amounts of complaints of us supporting too much development and not supporting enough from different voices within our community and from the developers in our community. So as to whether we're striking the balance, I think that review will help inform immensely whether we're achieving that aim, as well as the other housing objectives that we have around providing housing supply and affordability of housing for our residents and housing choice.
Thank you. Do we have any other councillors wish to speak to the item? Councillor Melican.
Yeah, I just had a few comments here. It's quite a detailed report, but the thing that concerned me, if you look at the number of pool registrations, and this is something I have been tracking, that a requirement by the state government that all pools be registered and meet new requirements. The number, this has been a huge cost impost on councils, and I think it's 2 staff members have basically been employed to make sure that all those pool registrations are completed. Now, well, that's an important thing to do. It's another cost burden on this council directed to us by the state government. And also in combustible cladding is another issue it's talked about in the paper, which hasn't been as costly, but is also another impost on this council being forced on us by the state government. So constantly councils are being forced to take up these these requirements. The state government changed the rule, and so all councils have now got to go around and get all the pools checked, and residents need to comply with the new regulations, and it's council's responsibility to make sure that happens. So there's huge cost impost on that. And the other one that they are talking about is orphan permits, where people are issued permits, and then for whatever reason those businesses go out of business, and then someone's got a permit, but the person that's conducted all the inspections of that building to date haven't got a record of those inspections, and our council could potentially be the inspector of last resort. So we'll have to go along and inspect those buildings, make sure they're compliant, which will be incredibly difficult if they're 3/4 finished, or you need to inspect at certain points, and that simply won't be able to happen. So there are a few issues, but I think the management of the team's doing an excellent job there, even despite all these issues. But we do really need to keep an eye on BPI to make sure it continues to function, provide the service, but also doesn't become too much of a cost burden on council.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillor wish to speak to the item? No, I'd just like to point out, I found it very interesting that there's over 80 buildings in Banyule that needed cladding to be removed for the fire, and we're up to 57 of the 80, so you might be seeing those works around town. But there are still some coming to us. In this last reporting quarter, there was some additional ones. I will now then put this motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. I now move on to item 6.5, Watsonia Town Square project update. There are two speakers to this item. Can I call Kevin Bagini to the lectern, please? You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and councillors, CEO, and welcome back, Deputy Mayor. We missed your happy, smiling face last meeting. It was good to see you back with us. This issue is not just very important to me, it's something that's taking up a great deal of my time since 2008. In that year, I was dealing with I think it was the East-West link in Footscray, and someone there in that group of people decided that, I lived over here and I should come over here and get involved with the North-East link. As a matter of fact, the ward councillor, the very first time I met that gentleman, he asked me, was I involved with objecting to the North-East link? So it goes back to all that time. And even though in the recent years that have gone by, I haven't had much to do, but I've always kept an eye on it, and I've seen what was involved, the costs that some people would have to pay much more than others. It's not just Watsonia that has been put out, it's quite a lot of other people as well. I have to, before I forget, pay tribute to the project manager. What a fine job he's done on this issue, this town square. He's done a terrific job, but even better has the ward councillor done in dealing with the residents of Watsonia. Not this year, last year. We're talking about going back 10, 12, 15 years. This is a very, very big thing. This thing that the state government has done for the people of Watsonia is great. It's a very small thing compared to what they're giving up. I applaud the council for supporting that, and I'm sure the council will go on and do even more for the people of Watsonia. They're bearing a heavy burden, they've paid a heavy price, and as I said,
Could you please
the project manager has done a terrific job, and the ward councillor has done an exemplary job. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll now call Jeremy Richards from Watsonia Traders Association up to the lectern. You're speaking for the recommendation. You have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Jeremy Richards, and despite Councillor Garotti's repeated attempts to give me a promotion tonight, I'm merely the Vice President of the Watsonia Traders Association. The Watsonia Traders Association represents 75 businesses located in the Watsonia Shopping Centre. We've been in general support for the Watsonia Town Square. We believe that once completed, it will be an amazing boost for our shopping centre and for the Watsonia community in general. We've also been very happy with recent communication from Banyule Council about early construction planning for the town square. This early communication has allowed us to go out and survey our traders and receive properly informed feedback from them. This feedback has been stark and unanimous. We weren't prepared for what we would discover. Putting it simply, our traders are struggling, many of them broken. We put it to our traders that the likely disruption that has been indicated by the preliminary construction plan released for tonight's meeting. Many traders couldn't get their heads around the level of construction planned. Those that did had one of two reactions: either anger or disbelief at the scope of the planned disruption, or a reaction I wasn't expecting, a shrug of the shoulders and hanging of head indicating, now this? After years of restricted trading, changing consumer behaviour and North East Link early works and realignment of Watsonia Road Greensboro Highway intersection, now this? And either straight after or even during the town square works, we have to deal with the digging of the North East Link trench, which will wipe out much of the Watsonia train station car park and further north. The job of the Watsonia Traders Association is to look after our traders, the strong ones and the weaker ones. We've got a diverse range of traders, even including a timber yard who needs access from large delivery trucks, to a cafe that directly faces the town square, who stands to have significant civic works on their doorstep for up to 18 months solid. The wonderful town square will be of no benefit to any traders who go out of business due to these disruptions, being the last straw on an already weakened camel's back. We can't overstate the cumulative effects of the business trauma of the past few years. We're asking Council to immediately and thoroughly discuss with each individual Watsonia business what the expected disruptions will mean for each individual business. Watsonia Traders Association doesn't have the time or resources to do this. We are volunteer powered and this is beyond our scope. We see this town square to be a bit like a level crossing removal, and we've seen firsthand, such as Rosanna, how disruptive they can be and the effect they can have on the whole shopping centre. We must learn from this and be more prepared for the project. I repeat, we're all for the project and we can't wait to have a dazzling new jewel in the centre of our town. But we beg Banyule Council to not ignore our findings, rush in and potentially damage beyond repair the very businesses who should benefit from this once-in-a-generation capital expenditure opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, councillors, there is an officer report before you as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor De Pasquale.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to second, but I think there might have been a slight amendment to the motion.
Yep. Would you like to read out the amendment as a mover?
Sorry, Councillor, would you like to move? No? Point 1 as is, point 2 as is, point 3 as is, point 4 notes that the construction costs for the Watsonia Town Square will be refined following receipt of tenders and that Council will refer the funding shortfall to the 2023-24 budget process for consideration. And point 5, continue to advocate to state government to continue to provide funding. Hang on, Mayor, let me get my head around this one. To continue advocating to state government to provide additional funding, for additional funding. Too many continues there. So move, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Garotti. As mover, would you like to speak to the
Oh,
item?
sorry, Mayor, I forgot. Before I do speak on the item, may I ask a question to the appropriate officer?
Go ahead.
In listening to our speakers this evening, understanding the impacts that will happen possibly with the construction, how is Council going to be communicating to the community and traders and businesses regarding what's going to happen when it's going to happen?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. As part of our project management, we maintain regular relationships with all interested parties, including our Traders Association. We've begun meetings with them on the concept staging plan, which is attached as a sort of indicative idea at this very early stage of the likely impacts. Part of the engagement for that is to start to understand the relationship between how the traders operate within the centre. We're pleased that the Traders Association in our meeting was able to provide us with a really handy list of events that the Watsonia Traders Group run each year, and that's helped us to start our thinking about how we align our disruption with some of those events. We're also very mindful of the needs of the road network to really operate with clarity during part of the construction process and to avoid those peak parts of trading season through the centre. It's certainly our ambition to try to minimise the impacts to the best of our ability, and I guess the only caveat on that is if it doesn't make financial sense or it could disrupt the project and elongate the amount of time that we're there, there may be instances where that disruption doesn't achieve the balance quite as well as others, but we're very conscious of the need to deliver the project within budget and to try and minimise the total extent of time, and so that will inform our thinking. And those regular meetings with stakeholders would be part of the way that we would communicate that. The communication plan also looks at really large signage on site to indicate areas of disruption well in advance so that people using the centre have a lot of forewarning that they need to change some of their patterns of behaviour as we move through the centre, which I think will help. We're very conscious that unlike some of our other streetscape projects, this is a more complicated space, not just one long street where we start at one end and where you see us head to the other. So we're very conscious about managing that. Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Would you like to speak to the item now?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, briefly, the concerns raised tonight have been concerns that have been spoken about for a while now, and that is not to downplay them by any stretch of the imagination. See, Mayor, our community reference group, the Watsonia Community Reference Group, who was actually, they're not active at the moment because it's past that, but at the initial stages where the state government announced the $5 million funding for this project due to the North East Link works, this council decided to create a community reference group where they met regularly. They came up with what needed to be done, how to manage everything, and that worked out really well. It was great for community consultation. It was a really positive outcome there. A few members in the gallery are actually in that reference group. I think on one hand, Mayor, I have to thank the state government for giving us the opportunity of the $5 million for this town square project. But on the other hand, I hear that the traders and I think community in general have lost a little bit of trust with regards to processes that they have seen out there. You know, to turn up with regards to the realignment of the Greensboro Highway to Watsonia Road, to turn up to your business in the morning and see that you can't get into your business because they've actually just put bollards and they've changed, you know, that's totally unacceptable and that shouldn't have happened. Phone call comes to us, we talk to the officers, what can be done? Well, they should have been communicated to by, you know, the North East Link pre-works, you know, group. You know, they just weren't doing it. Now, with regards to Rosanna, level crossing removal, another state government project. See, I'm finding it very difficult to accept that this council won't bat and advocate and do the right thing for the traders because it has the power to do that in this project. With regards to the state government, they're going to run their projects the way that they run their projects. We can't tell them what to do. The community can complain to them. They're running their own show. But what I ask of the community is not to put us in the same bucket as the state government. We've got assurances, and I've been speaking with officers, and Councillor Grotti has been on the game, and all councillors have been on the go and speaking to officers that we need the commitment from this council to be there with the traders and the community if this project is to go ahead. You know, it needs to be, everyone needs to know exactly what's going to be happening with ample warning to plan and prepare and not just, okay, you're getting this and that's it and you're going to just deal with it because that's unacceptable and I understand that. So you have my commitment that I will be doing everything I possibly can to be making sure that the whole plan is there. We understand what the tender looks like. We understand what the process looks like and there is minimal disruption in a situation where there will be some disruption. It's inevitable. We have to just manage that. So I'm just asking the community and the traders to be part of that process as well. And I'm sure they will, but I'm committed to make sure that it happens. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the second like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We'll make a few brief comments. So in December last year, I called an urgent meeting with the ward councillor and with the chief executive about this project and about another project, because part of our job as councillors is to look ahead 12, 18 months, 2 years ahead from now and identify issues. And I was quite honest to the CEO that when I looked through projects happening in the northern area of Banyule, this had a red light against it. I was deeply concerned, and as was Councillor Mark Di Pasquale, around where this project was going. So we intervened and we stepped in. We caught up with the CEO. Obviously now we've had some success with being able to settle the land arrangements with the church. A tender process is underway. Officers are fully engaged. I'm very pleased that the Chief Executive and senior officers have met with the traders and to understand their expectations around how works are to be scheduled and to try and factor that in as best as possible to the construction timeframe. This is an expensive, challenging project for council. As Councillor Di Pasquale touched on, we've received about $5 million in funding from state. We'd already set aside about $500,000 for the toilet upgrade, which is now incurring as part of this project. In response to community feedback through that reference group, and Mayor, I might ask for a little bit of time more, the overwhelming feedback was to get everything done in the one go, including the car park expansion up toward High Street and the removal of not only the roundabout at the town square centre, but the High Street roundabout, and doing everything together. And if you read the report, the total costs, and to be confirmed after tender, you're looking at $9 million plus. Now, there's only $5.5 million there. This will be referred to budget process, but Mark and I, we're going to have to do a lot of hard work with this group because the council's got a $20 million deficit in terms of, or I shouldn't call it a deficit, but this council has a sizable funding shortfall when it comes to its capital funding situation. So for us to go in, we've got to go in and bat for another $4 to $5 million. We'll do that. And I'm pretty confident that the group here understands the overall strategic value of this project. But the reason I say that is to be honest to stakeholders, because nothing's ever locked in, and particularly when you're looking at things $5 to $10 million. So it's very pleasing for me to hear the Vice President endorse the project and to have the traders on board. We're going to need your support. It's not going to be easy. The easiest thing for council to do would have been to say, well, look, perhaps we don't do the project at all. But the overwhelming benefit that this will provide in the long term, but I just wanted to provide that context out there to stakeholders that this is tough work and it's tough work for the ward councillors, but we're onto it. We're meeting regularly with the CEO about this and keeping our colleagues regularly updated.
Can you please sum up, Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any other councillor that wishes to speak to the item? Councillor Neely.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just thinking about what the traders have said and also, you know, Councillor Champion and I have walked around the Weir Street project and listened to traders about the hardship over the last few years with restrictions, and I acknowledge what the traders have been through with disruptions and now all the construction that's going to be there and with this project continue to be there. And as Councillor Di Pasquale said, it is inevitable. Unfortunately, you know, I'm excited about the future of the Watsonia Town Square. I think it's wonderful for the area. I'm so pleased that the area has this investment. It's just really great. And we know that there will still be hurdles from here on till we get to the end. So just for a positive spin on all of this, the concerns are heard, councillors are more than aware, and I think the key way forward is communication. So there is lots of notice when the disruption is occurring, and there are ways around that disruption. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Milliken.
Yeah, I'll just pass a few comments. Yeah, it's a very important project. It has been looked at for a while, but as Councillor Garotti said, it's significantly over budget, and this is a state government project as part of the North East Link. So who's responsible for that shortfall in funding? Is it a council responsibility or a state government responsibility? And would this project be proceeding? Would Watsonia need the lifeline that it does need if it wasn't for the North East Link? Because that's the main disruptor of this, and why the Watsonia Traders Association and all its traders are so concerned that this project could be a death knell to that entire precinct and entire centre. So, should this council be putting our hand in our pocket to complete this project, or should that be a state government responsibility? And that's certainly something we need to take up with the state government.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? All right, I'll add something on this. These activity centres are, in my view, the heart of many communities. Some people think it's the football club. Others think this, and I think that it's absolutely essential. We invest in our activity centres. It's a place where people meet and gather. We heard earlier on East Ivanhoe, we do need to invest in these places, and we should not be cutting costs when we want to create these absolutely essential services, I believe, that council is responsible for. With that, I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to item 6.6, 3.1, 31, Watsonia Road, Watsonia, liquor licence for a bar. There are 3 speakers to this item this evening. Amy Hurst or Ben Malby, are you present tonight? Yes. Could one of you please come to the lectern? You're speaking against the recommendation, I believe. You have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I am speaking against, I will say technically against, for 4 very minor reasons that I will come to in just a moment. To be clear, where I am, I'm basically across the street from the proposed bar, and we are speaking on behalf of not only ourselves but a number of the other residents of the street. It is a residential street. It's usually quite a quiet street. We were opposed to the original application for various reasons. We're very grateful to the council for its recommended changes to the application and particularly the 22 permit conditions. With those and the 4 minor changes I'll come to in just a moment, we would support the application. However, if any of those changes are being varied or changed, then we obviously wouldn't be able to maintain that support. The 4 minor amendments or changes that we would propose to the permit conditions are limited to things that require involvement of local residents and a couple of capacity-related issues. So the first is we would like community members to be able to be involved in consultation for the operating hours if they are to change in the future. The same would go for any changes to the noise and amenity plan. So again, subject to resident consultation. The third minor issue is that the capacity should be reconsidered, commensurate with the reduced floor space that's been required by the condition 1D, namely that car parks be introduced, so there's been a loss of available floor space. And then finally, that any exterior lighting not be directed into neighbouring properties or towards those properties. I otherwise rely on the content of the letter that we sent to each of the councillors on the 23rd of February. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to Kevin Bagini, who will address us in person. For the recommendation, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes.
Last one tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'm in favour of this 100%. I like wine bars. The thing I like about wine bars is that so many other people like them too. and mostly the good people like them. Being in a wine bar, I find that there seems to me to be a higher proportion of women will go to a wine bar than men that you would find in an RSL or a pub or anything like that, especially in the mid-20s and onward age bracket. As I said, I live in Ivanhoe, and somewhere nearly, maybe 8 years ago, we had a wine bar open up not too far from where I stand now. Now, that was an outstanding success, I thought. It did well. It had the type of people, as I said, you wouldn't find in another drinking establishment. Quite a few women, and I understood that their take dropped when this office here was closed down to go to Greensborough. So there was a lot of people from this very office here actually went down to that wine bar. They enjoyed it. And so did I, so did my wife. It was that successful that another wine bar in Ivanhoe opened up down the road. And that sort of catered to a younger clientele, but it fulfilled the same need. And in the last 5 to 8 years, I have not been made aware of any sort of a disturbance. No crime has taken place. There's been no fights or anything like that. If there has, I've never heard about it. People behave in a reasonably respectable manner. They have a good evening. And I would think that, yes, if we had this
Can we please?
one... Not another 3 minutes,
No.
Mayor?
No. Thank you,
Well-
Kevin.
I'll run for office, maybe I'll get it. This will go very well in Watsonia. I urge. Thank you.
Thank you. And the third speaker, there'll be a written statement now that will be read out on behalf of Sarah Maguire by Mark Giglio, Director of Corporate Services. Sarah is speaking for the recommendation. Mark and Sarah, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Dear councillors, we are writing to express our support for the proposed application for a new business at 31 Watsonia Road, Watsonia. As members of the Watsonia Traders Association, we are dedicated to promoting economic development and growth within the Watsonia community, and we believe that this new business will help achieve these goals. It also supports the direction of our business plan that encourages the growth of a nighttime economy at the Watsonia Shopping Centre. We anticipate that this new business will increase foot traffic and economic activity in the area, particularly in the evenings, providing benefits to both the business owners and the wider community. This would also create new job opportunities and provide a new space for locals to socialise and enjoy their evenings. However, we also recognise the potential impact of a nighttime business on the surrounding community, particularly in terms of noise disturbance, which may affect the quality of life for local residents. Nonetheless, we have trust in Banyule City Council to oversee the business and ensure that it complies with all relevant requirements and regulations. We're confident that if the application is approved, Banyule City Council will work to ensure that the business operates within reasonable hours and adheres to any noise and traffic regulations, thereby minimising any negative impact on the local community. In conclusion, we support the approval of the application for this new business at 31 Watsonia Road, Watsonia, as it aligns with our objective of encouraging economic growth and development within the Watsonia community. Thank you for considering our concerns and our letter of support. Yours sincerely, the Watsonia Traders Association Committee.
Thank you. I now, councillors, there is an officer's report before you. There is another speaker. Okay. George, are you present? I don't have you on my papers. Please come forward.
To be fair, you can be forgiven for not trying to pronounce my last name. It is a little bit of a mouthful, so Thank you, Mayor and fellow councillors and council members. My name is George Giannakopoulos. I'm one of the owners of Little Heroes Australia, and it is myself, my business partner, and one of our colleagues that are looking to open up the establishment at 31 Watsonia Road. I do ask for a little bit of leniency if possible with time, just because there are a few things to go through. But one of the biggest things for me is I would really appreciate if everyone in this room understood who exactly we are and what we've been doing as part of the community of Banyule, Nillumbik, Whittlesea and a lot of other councils over the period of the last 7 years. A lot of that work has actually, not that at the time I understood the significance of the award, but has actually, I guess Banyule has put us forward as its nominee for the Northern Business Achievement Award for this year, or for last year, sorry. For a lot of the things that we have been doing in regards to not only supporting families in need, early childhood education, a lot of traders association, a lot of community events, fundraisers, and a lot of external events, things like the Eltham Rotary Festival as well. A lot of our, I guess, business history and culture and philosophy has always been about helping others, and that's something that we were really and still are, I guess, looking forward to bringing to the Watsonia area. Now, I understand some of the objections which were brought forward even early days, and one of the biggest things for us is we don't want to be seen as a square peg in a round hole. And it was more about working with the residents in Watsonia to come up with amicable solutions moving forward, which cater for all. Some of those things have been rectified very quickly, which would include the smoking area at the back of the property be removed altogether. We've also looked at other issues which more having to do with catering and supporting residents. With the opening on the side of Black Street, we've brought it forward 5 metres to enable that no sound be actually interfering with the residents behind the property, and even put forward various solutions when it comes to trading hours and noise limitations, with roller shutters being closed by certain times. There are a number of solutions that we have put forward in writing to council, which I have shared with Councillor Rick and Mark as well, which I hope they've all passed on to yourselves. But I am open to questions and obviously looking to cater for any other solutions if possible.
Do you have any questions for the Speaker? Councillor Grotti?
Yeah, Mayor,
Councillor
question. Yeah.
De Pasquale?
Question. Thank you, George, for coming in tonight and speaking. Question I have is, what is your understanding of any changes to any of the conditions of a planning permit? What is your understanding of any community consultation that you will have to go through, or not, during that process, whether it be either with noise and or hours of operation? Yeah, what is your expectation of that?
There are existing laws and I guess guidelines through either the EPA or Banyule, which we've actually made sure not only to abide with all of them, but even compromise to an extent to actually cater for the residents to make sure that there's less of an inconvenience on themselves. The whole point for us is we want to continue to be part of this community. We've been here supporting the community for the last 7 years. We've employed currently over 70 staff. We cater for over 220 locations. And it's something where across the board, every year, we don't do things for recognition. We do things because we want to help and support those around us. Even where, as a venue, we didn't apply for a food permit. Instead, we'd rather actually support all the traders in the street. It doesn't matter whether if you're a restaurant, a takeaway establishment, or even during the day as well, because by us coming into the street and working with the traders and the Traders Association, you don't just get the venue that we're proposing. You also get a lot of our other companies to come in and actually provide various supports during the day as well. The same way that we've worked with all the other traders associations through Banyule, Watsonia Street and Watsonia Traders will be the beneficiaries of that as well. So whether that be additional events, I guess enticing young families to come into the area, spend money, stick around, and to be fair, even the development which is being proposed is something that on the one hand we can't wait for, because it gives us a greater avenue to provide greater support to the traders in the street and to the residents for that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. And just one other question. George, I received calls right from a while ago now when this all first started happening from members of the community saying that the proposal is going to be for a nightclub. What is it that you're proposing? And what is it that the community got, did they get it wrong? Where is this all going?
I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of misinformation thrown around via social media and by various people in the area for one reason or another. And unfortunately, as much as I'd love to fact check everyone in that context, all the residents that did have issues, a lot of them did come see my business partner or myself on the premises. Others actually contacted us via our details with the planning permit, which had already been issued to the general public. Unfortunately, we don't dictate what a licence gets called. And anything that has to do with, I guess, liquor, music, entertainment of any sorts, especially when there's no food on the premises, is exactly that. It's classified as a nightclub licence. Now, that does not mean in any way, shape or form we are looking to open up a nightclub. We are not looking to, if I'm being very honest and specific, we're not interested in the 18 to 25-year-old age demographic. If they come, look, don't get me wrong, everyone's currency is welcome, especially if it's going to go towards supporting others in the street, but it's not our target market. Now, from there, a lot of the things that we are trying to do, even from a sound point of view, we are using soundproof panelling all at the back. I noted, I believe in some of the information which council shared, they mentioned the 75mm roof panelling, it's actually 150mm. So in that area at the back, the whole point of us doing that to not disturb residents in Black Street. By having the rear of the venue go all the way to the boundary, it means that there's no cars, there's no foot traffic, there's the minimal amount of disturbance humanly possible to not disturb anyone. The only people that would disturb residents, to be perfectly honest with you, would be fellow residents. And I know some of them have spoken to us. Some have even said that they can't wait for us to open up to be customers, and I'm sure they would be respectful of the neighbours as well.
All right. I believe that there is a question for George.
I have a question. Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying, George. I was listening to those answers. The only concern that I do have comes back to the responsible service of alcohol laws. Having been a worker in the hospitality sector, a former licensee myself, delivering and assessing responsible service of alcohol classes for many, many years, my understanding is that licensed premises should be providing food. And when I say food, I actually mean a menu with meals, not just packets of chips or that kind of thing. Okay. While I love your want for your guests to buy food at the other trading outlets, you can't be responsible for that. As soon as they leave your premises, they are choosing to go wherever they like. They are, however, your responsibility on your premises. So while they're on your premises and consuming alcohol, and obviously you'll have non-alcoholic beverages as well, I appreciate that, but if they're there and they're consuming alcohol, they're not breaking that alcohol up with food. So how are you performing responsible service of alcohol by not providing food?
So to clarify the means of how we are providing food, we have already spoken with a lot of the food traders in the street to clarify the same way that you could do an Uber Eats or Menulog or anything like that. A system will be put in place via whether it be QR code or going directly into their programming feed where residents can order from inside our establishment and have food delivered to that establishment. So it's not about us having a commercial kitchen because the effects of that, to be honest, again, not wanting to take money away from fellow traders, I'd rather support them. Separate to that, as part of our liquor licensing regulations, the whole point of responsible serving of alcohol is to ensure that people do not pass that limit of being intoxicated, acting irresponsibly, or taking any inappropriate matters into their own hand. Now, the same way that, I guess as part of the licensing, we would have people on site trained with their RSA and also ensuring that all measures are followed accordingly.
Thank you. I believe there's one addition. Oh, do we have any other questions for George? No. I believe there's one question here for the first speaker. Ben Morby, could you please come back to the lectern? Thank you, George. Councillor McKern.
Those four the proposal have had to say. I'm interested in your comments, Mr. Morby. I thought I heard, and I'm seeking clarification here, that you'd be prepared to accept a planning permit with a greater number of particular conditions. Am I correct in understanding that, Mr. Morby?
Yeah, so we're happy with pretty much all of the conditions. The permit in the form of that it's currently before the council, just with 4 additional minor conditions that we think would be helpful. And those 4 were, if I can just reiterate them, the changes to the operating hours need to be done with consultation with the immediate residents. Changes to the noise and amenity plan that's been proposed be done with consultation with the immediate residents. The third one is the capacity. So I think this might come under the liquor licensing thing more than possibly the council's approval, but condition 1D is that there be car parks introduced at the back of the premises. Currently the capacity proposed is 100. We think that the capacity should be reduced commensurate with that change in the floor plan size, because 5 metres of whatever the width of the property is, so you're not going to be able to fit as many people in. And then finally, the fourth one is probably very minor and very straightforward, just any exterior lighting not be directed into neighbouring properties. One of the back properties, or one of the properties to which this premises backs onto, has windows that face towards the shops, so they don't want to have lights shining into their windows and into their backyard and front yard. Front yard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morby. Rather than outrightly objecting to the proposal, it is refreshing to hear a resident who potentially will live across the road from this development should it go ahead.
The shop's been empty for years. We'd rather have a tenant in there. We have nothing against George, developing and bringing a bit of extra vibrancy to the strip. We just want it to be in keeping with what's already going on, and the council's recommended conditions we think are fantastic and make it fit. So
thank you, Mr. Morby. You say also that you represent a number of residents in the street.
Yes.
That's important, I think, for the councillor group to note as well. Mr. Mayor, when is the appropriate juncture to ask a question through you of the Director of City Development with regards to Mr. Morby's questions or other comments?
Mayor, if I may, I was waiting for the opportunity to be able to ask the relevant officer some questions not only raised by the Speaker but other residents who have made submission to hear the officer response for those in the gallery. So if I may have that opportunity, and I think that'll cover off what Councillor McKern was seeking to do.
Let's hear it.
Please ask those questions, Councillor Grotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through yourself to the appropriate officer. But the Speaker tonight and the objectors have raised to Councillor Di Pasquale and I a number of queries, as you know, because we were in touch with you over the weekend to work through them and to discuss them. Is it worthwhile? I think it will take a little bit of time, but this is a big application. We've had people here invest the time to be here. The first area was around the reduction to patron numbers, and just seeking officer feedback on that.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. In this case, the planning application is both for a liquor licence and buildings and works, but the actual use of the land doesn't require permission. So part of our consideration is whether there's a sufficient amount of available car parking in the broader centre to accommodate the shortfall of 5 spaces. But the actual control of the number of patrons on site would be regulated most commonly through the building regulations in terms of the area and space that they have has certain occupancy requirements depending on how they lay it out. So from our perspective, the patron numbers is a cap that relates to the parking waiver that we've afforded. It may well be that if it's not possible to fit within the space and meet those requirements, they'll need to make operational decisions around how many people they allow in the premises at any one time, depending on how they have it laid out.
Thank you. And another area raised was the removal of the existing crossover.
Yes, in the agenda before council, there's no condition, but a condition could be included to require the removal of the existing crossover, which would no longer be required for direct vehicle access. That would have the opportunity to create at least 1, but possibly 2 on-site car parks back within the road reserve that are currently unavailable because they would cause the blocking of the crossover. So certainly if council were of a view to support the application, they could include an additional condition to provide for that.
Thank you. And then a query has been raised about the request for acoustic reports at various due dates.
Yeah, so we've included a range of conditions that reference the state laws, as George referred to. So the EPA has set standards for noise requirements. It would be unusual for a premises of this size to require the preparation of a noise emission report as a matter of course. That would be more something that we might move to if we had complaints and felt that the premises wasn't managing itself.
There was a question around the noise from live music.
Yeah, so live music, I think the question was more around, as people move around the venue, how do they manage it if they have live music playing? Again, the responsibility is back on the premises operator. If they find, for example, that people moving from the front of the premises out to the back with the door being left open causes unreasonable impacts and unreasonable noise that breach the regulations, then it may well be that they can't make that part of their premises available if they want to have that live music playing at that volume. Or they could turn down the music so that when the doors are opening and closing, there are no impacts. But again, those state laws that we have the power to enforce would ensure that we can manage that balance.
Query about the light source beyond the boundaries.
Yeah, so one of the conditions of the permit, I believe it's condition 5, actually requires that the amenity of the area be protected, and it's a very long and wordy condition, so it may not have been immediately apparent, but it is a standard condition if you like. It says that you can't cause any detrimental amenity impacts, and one of the emissions is one of artificial light. So that's basically light shining from one premises into the place where it's not supposed to be. So we have powers of enforcement if any external lighting isn't baffled properly so that it lights up the space that it's in, but not the next door neighbours.
A query had been raised tonight and by others about the request for events or changes to hours to go through residents.
Through you, Matt, I think this question is probably a relevant one. The noise, the hours of operation condition does have a standard clause, which is unless with the written consent of the responsible authority. These clauses are quite normal in relation to hours of operations because you could think of instances perhaps when the Motsonia Festival is on and there's a different arrangement. We might have closed the street, there might be other things happening, that it would be possible or plausible or probable that council might consider, for example, trading starting from lunchtime in line with one of those events. We would see those consents for one-off variations to the hours of operation as not something that necessarily would always warrant consultation with the community in each instance. But there is a long-standing planning principle that the hours of operations are set out in that condition. If you're looking at a permanent and substantial change to those hours, that would warrant an amendment to the condition and not just merely written consent by council without the inclusion of community consultation.
Thank you. And just two more. The resident approval and review of documentation, including the NAP.
Again, the Noise and Amenity Action Plan is a condition of the permit. If the applicant wanted to seek to have a requirement set out in that amenity plan removed so that they didn't comply with it, that would be an amendment to the conditions of the permit. And more normally those sorts of amendments go through public consultation.
And then finally, queries have been raised around any extra conditions for queuing and security alarms.
Security alarms are covered again by the noise regulations in terms of if they go off late at night. The queuing, we don't perhaps see that as such an issue for this venue because of the nature of it as a wine bar. It's a bit of a different focus. I take George's point about the classification of liquor licence, but for us this is a food and drink premises. It would be unusual for us to place obligations on a premise of this scale to provide for queuing.
Thank you, Director. No further questions.
Councillor
Sorry, Mayor, I have
Pasquale.
just one further question for the Director or appropriate officer. In the event that the applicants are not, and vice versa, if the community are not happy with any conditions or the permit itself, what
avenue does the applicant have to challenge that, VCAT, etc.? What will be that process there?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We would be issuing a notice of decision in this instance because we do have objections. So if any person, including the applicant, is aggrieved by the conditions that are laid out in that permit or the permit itself, they have a right of appeal. So resident objectors, or any objector for that matter, whether they be resident or not, has a right of appeal, and as does the applicant if they want to challenge any conditions.
Thank you. And I believe there's one more question later. Councillor McKern.
I'm just wondering, through you, Mayor, to the Director of City Development, Ms Swan, whether there's scope to actually tighten some of those conditions in light of some of the first speaker's comments. For example, Councillor Garotti raised the issue about lighting, actually spreading beyond the area that it is meant to affect. And I think, if I heard correct, Ms Swan, you mentioned that it would be covered under amenity. Well, if you read the clause for amenity, it is quite broad. I don't understand how somebody looking at these conditions of permit, particularly, say, a layperson, would necessarily understand that lighting is covered under amenity. So is there scope to actually clarify some of these conditions in light of what the first speaker has requested?
Through you, Mayor, the amenity condition that we've cited is a standard use condition, so we're not the only council that uses that condition. It also relates back to wording that's been tried, true and tested through the range of enforcement powers that we have. So there are certain terms and other matters that are contained within that condition that have been tested, either in the tribunals or in the courts. So I'd probably caution against varying the wording from what's been a very successful condition in managing those things in the past.
But with all due respect, it is under your jurisdiction to actually write the conditions regardless of what might happen at the tribunal or what's been tried and tested. Is that not right, Ms Swan?
No, that's correct. And this one clearly states that the emission of artificial light is an amenity measure that we can consider. So from my perspective, it's quite clear as to what it intends to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is a recommendation before us on the agenda papers. I would ask for a councillor
Mayor, if I may move. Thank you, Mayor.
to move the motion. Councillor Marcus Pasquale, and seconded by...
Sorry, and just through the move, I do believe that there was an amendment.
As a mover, would you be comfortable with the amended words on the screen?
So point 3, as in, I think we had background of that as Director was answering that. Prior to commencement of the occupation of the building enabled by this permit, the crossover located on Black Street must be reinstated to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. Mayor, I just want a clarification of that. I would suggest that would be curb and channel. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mayor. So reinstatement of the crossover means removal, and by way of removal, reinstating back the curb edge to run in a straight line with the balance of the curb.
Mayor, if I may understand that a little bit further, I may need to understand whether that has impact on the use or how the building functions. Can we have some clarification of whether that would be an inappropriate condition? Mayor?
Could the applicant please respond to that with yes or no if possible? Okay, thank you for that.
I'm a bit confused because I'm of an understanding that it's a crossover. So in effect, it will be instated to a footpath. A footpath would continue.
The recommendation that you're moving would recommend the closure of that access there and to footpath.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the recommendation I'm moving. With respect,
Could the director please respond to the question?
Yeah, if I could clarify, the current plan shows a pedestrian scale gate through the fence into the rear of the premises, whereas currently there's a large double gate vehicle access. As the building doesn't extend past, that's where the rear access for car parking is currently provided. And so that would be the crossover that we'd be looking to reinstate. On the plans shown here, it would be that area would be affected by bar 2 and some of the seating areas, so it wouldn't be readily accessible by a vehicle, so it certainly wouldn't require the full extent of a vehicle crossover to provide access to the property, because there is no prospect of vehicle access.
Thank you. Does that satisfy your question?
Mayor, look, it does in my opinion, but I'm not the applicant. I'm only the one who is looking at this and probably saying, well, there was a crossover there that would take deliveries into the back part of that building originally, and if that's not what that building is going to be used for, to actually back a truck up to the building and offload things, then I would suggest that would be okay to reinstate that to curb and channel, and then the footpath just continues on.
Look,
Possibly.
we've got a
That's my
motion
call, Mayor.
before us up on the screen. Would you like to move the motion as is, or have item part 3 removed?
If possible, could we have point 3 up there again, or new point 3 up there again?
Could I put a recommendation that we suspend matters for a moment while this
Oh, that would be good, Mayor. I've been
this
holding off. I
item
need to go.
is considered briefly, and I wish for a mover and a seconder.
Move to
Councillor
suspend
Neely,
this.
second
Yep.
by Councillor Metsanikos. So we suspend meeting for 5 minutes. the screen?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. I really needed that break because it's been a long night already. If we can,
Could the audience please quiet down? We're continuing on with the meeting. Councillor De Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. May I move point 3, prior to the commencement of the occupation of the building enabled by this permit, the crossover located on Black Street must be reinstated or reduced to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. 1 as is, 2 as is, and the rest as is, because it's going to be too long. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Garotti. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for that. I don't think we're there. So I don't think the compromises that have been done to this point with regards to officers are going to somewhat appease the applicants at this stage. So we may be in a situation where this may be going to VCAT, which is possibly a disappointing situation because now the community faces possible increase and more. That's the risk with regards to something like this. You know, there are certain, in the conditions now, there are a certain time of operations which are quite restrictive. There are 12 opportunities over a calendar year to extend those opening hours to 11 p.m, whereas in general on a Friday and Saturday night it's 10 p.m. close. Very, very restrictive as far as I'm concerned. So I'm down at the wine bar, I'm having a wine with my friend and the football's on and the fourth quarter starts and then all of a sudden the establishment has to close and we've got to go somewhere else to watch the last quarter of the football. It's a little, so with regards to that, we're not there. With regards to the noise amenities towards the rear of the property, there's now in the conditions that there's a 5 metre buffer that needs to be left and 2 car spaces needs to be put into that area. That is not necessarily the intention of that area or how that area should be used. With regards to the sidewalk and the footpath, the reduction of the crossover there, I think it's appropriate, but there are, I think, more pressing issues than that. So we're in a situation here tonight, Mayor, where it's good that the officers have actually mentioned, or the recommendation is to grant the permit. So whether the conditions are too stringent, I don't know yet. We don't know yet. Now we're in a situation now where Watsonia is definitely changing massively. So the gentrification is actually happening. We see now, being a councillor now for, over 10 years now, Mayor, nothing like this ever would have happened in Watsonia, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. We'd get residents coming in who have just moved into the area who are younger. They'd say to us, can we have a wine bar? Where's a wine bar? Where's a wine bar? Every week we'd get someone asking, where's a wine bar? And then we have one establishment opening. Now we have the potential of 2. The gentrification now, the new generation coming in is pushing it there. The other pressures we have, Mayor, which is a major, major pressure, is the North East Link now feeding this area from the city. This is now going to be the edge of the city where people can travel to in 10 minutes. It's going to be a meeting point. It's going to be a destination point. You add to that the Watsonia Town Square. You add to that the apartments that are going up on the corner of Watsonia Road, Greensboro Highway and Richards Avenue. That type of development is happening. You add to that possibly a new Watsonia train station, which has got to happen eventually.
Could you please wrap up?
Very, very quickly, if I may. There's a lot to talk about tonight. So the pressures on Watsonia, I don't think, and I'm respectful of my community who has elected me to this position. I need to respect them with regards to their amenity, making sure that they're taken care of, etc., which we'll always take care of that. But that tussle now, where there's the gentrification of Watsonia moving forward to the next level, I don't think many people are ready for it, and that's the issue we're having right now. Maybe in 2 years' time, this will be.
Thank you, Councillor.
A few months ago, Mayor, we had.
Could we wrap up? Yeah,
I'll just wrap up on the basis that a few months ago we had a packaged liquor permit come to us, and we said no, we don't need that. But this type of activation, I think, is something that the Watsonia community should have and should be entitled to. So look, I'm going to be supporting the recommendation as it is tonight. There's nothing more I think responsibly I'd be able to change with regards to hours, etc. That's just not in my scope to do that. If the applicant needs to change that, they have the avenue to do that. Thank you, Mayor.
Does the seconder have, would they like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to comment. And I think there's been a few meaty items tonight where, you know, I always keep to time and probably didn't appreciate being cut off. So these are big items when we're talking Watsonia Town Square, liquor licence permit. And I certainly recall as a mayor, I always gave that leniency and understanding toward councillors when they were looking to articulate that position. So some constructive feedback for our mayor. Look, this has been a process to get through. You know, initially, I suppose what crystallised it for me was the conversation that I had with the officer when the recommendation initially came out to say, look, where are we at in this journey? And I think as Natasha summed it up to me quite well, is to say, look, we're going through a process here in Watsonia. We've had a wine bar come up. There's a second one. The applicant seems to be very well run, really good operators, really solid. But what happens in a situation where you didn't have that, where you had potentially a poorer operator come in, and you had noise issues and you had amenity issues? All of a sudden, the social licence that had been built up from the community to support these sort of establishments would disappear. So what this is about is it's about building credibility in this sort of transformation in the area, building resident confidence in it. And so I understand from an applicant perspective, you know, some of the conditions are tight and you'd probably prefer more. But equally from the resident perspective, you know, they like the area and they're concerned about developments going in there that are going to impact on that adversely. And I think what I've been pleased to see is an officer recommendation chart that pathway really carefully and really appropriately. I think we were able to get a further amendment in here tonight that both the applicant and the residents were able to sign off on. This is a balancing act. And I'd like to think, and we went through all the queries that had come through residents, and as a council, we'd scrutinised them with Natasha over the weekend, and we're comfortable with where we've landed. So we'd like to think this is a balanced, fair, overall proposition for both the applicant and the community. The applicant's nodding. You've got your rights and appeal. Good luck to you, but I will say this, when council forms a position and we resolve a position, we fight it. And we fight for our residents and we fight for our community, because when we make decisions, we believe that we are balancing up everyone's rights and obligations and coming to a fair outcome. So our officers are resourced, and if this goes down to VCAT, we will fight and we will stand up for residents. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, firstly, I'd like to congratulate the two councillors, Ward Councillor Di Pasquale and also his support, Councillor and Councillor Garotti. It strikes me that the two councillors have done a lot of work speaking to the various residents, applicant involved, but also then communicating back with the officers to come up with a reasoned, balanced approach. And I agree. These are difficult decisions with conflicting interests. We have, the status quo of the existing situation, but also, as Councillor Di Pasquale has mentioned, we have the associated urbanisation, gentrification of what is an growing city. And let us be aware that the projected population for Greater Melbourne is 10 million. That's in the policy, that's what this state is working towards. So 5 million people have to go somewhere, and they all want livable cities. So you have wine bars coming in, you have these sorts of venues that create vibrancy, that bring interest for residents, and I face the same issues here in Ivanhoe. where on one hand, I'm accused of being able to shoot a cannonball down Upper Heidelberg Road on a Saturday evening because very little's open. Yet on the other hand, we have residents complaining when establishments want to open for longer periods to create that interest and vibrancy and bring more people to the area. Instead, where are these people going? They're going to Fairfield. They're going to Northcote because Northcote High Street is vibrant on a Saturday night. I want to see economic development happening here, and I want to see our residents benefiting from establishments such as that being proposed. I thought tonight's speaker against wasn't actually speaking against, but wanted a refinement of the conditions, a better understanding. And speaking to him during the break, and I see he's nodding his head enthusiastically, I think that we're just about there. Councillor Di Pasquale said there are some points that perhaps still need resolution, but overall the main game seems to be one of support. So I, for one, will be supporting the motion this evening. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do we have any other councillors? And can I remind you we have time limits. Please try and keep to them. No further councillors? Okay. With that, I'd like to... I now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Moving on to item 7.1, Peter Rowland Group contract update and KPIs for the Centre Ivanhoe. There are no speakers on this item. Councillors, there is an officer report before you, as set out in the agenda papers. I believe there's no amendments. I call for a councillor to move the motion. Councillor Garotti. Second, Councillor Neely. Would the mover wish to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very briefly to say, look, it's terrific this report's coming up with the KPIs. Interestingly, though, earlier this evening, the relevant director of the program and I were having a chat about performance of the contractor, and I think it's very important that we have a KPI framework in place because certainly if the level of service that the council's experienced of late is consistent perhaps with what our community is experiencing, then we're going to have to utilise this KPI framework to ensure a good service is delivered. Very happy to recommend this to the council.
Thank you, councillor. Seconder doesn't wish to speak. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? No. I then now put this motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We'll now move on to item 8.1, Draft Banyule Economic Development Strategy 2023 to 28, Public Exhibition. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there's an officer report before you set out in the agenda papers. Can I have a councillor move that motion, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move, but with a few amendments. And then a few amendments to that, just following discussion that occurred after our pre-briefing. But the motion one, to endorse the draft Banyule Economic Development Strategy for a period of community consultation from 1st of March 2023 to 31st March 2023 with the following amendments. A, inclusion of additional strategic direction 1.4 under the theme 1A, dynamic and supported business community, entitled Reduce Legislative and Regulatory Burdens on Business. B, inclusion of additional strategic direction 2.4 under theme 2, Workforce Growth and Attraction and Diversity, entitled Activate and Support Social Enterprise in Banyule. Then E, inclusion of a new action that involves consulting with business on their workforce labour challenges and working with them to address these. Officers that populate the details of the action and ensure there is no monetary cost assigned to this action. So moved. So obviously C and D will be deleted from what's up there.
Could we please amend the recommendation? So this is...
And the rest as is, Mayor. Yeah, if I may have it up on the screen. Yeah, we've made you earn your salary tonight, Kristen. So just, yeah, inclusion of a new action, and then that involves, so, yeah.
No, so take out right up.
That involves consulting.
Yep.
Move the middle.
Yeah, she's got it now, Al.
Are you now comfortable with that, Councillor? Do I have a seconder? Councillor De Morelos? Would the mover like to speak to the
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So Councillor De Moralis and I were very honoured to be appointed to lead the community and business reference group that helped to develop this plan. It's a good plan, a solid one, to go out to community consultation. Just these amendments are designed to really emphasise, the need around reducing burden on business. Although that's covered in the plan, really highlighting it as a key strategic direction we think is important, because certainly in the consultation we were involved in, that's what a lot of business is saying, that things are just the burdens are growing, so highlighting that as a focus area. And then obviously social enterprise is a real focus of this council and doing a lot of success. So capturing that as a key strategic direction, noting there's a lot of work covered in the plan, is helpful. We did have quite a bit of a discussion as a councillor group around the workforce gap analysis and the housing strategy. Those two things are will cost the council $140,000, and their consultancy reports. So I don't see value in that, and I think council needs to begin, $1 at a time to claw back unnecessary expenditure, and certainly calling on consultants to do things like a housing strategy that's really a state government purview, in my view, is unnecessary. But having said that, I think the councillor group were keen to go out with the strategy as is, hear the feedback, and when it comes back for final endorsement, we can reflect on those points again. So happy to put this forward to the group for consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So as Councillor Grotti has mentioned, it's about refining what's going out and just ensuring that the officers are going to go out, they are going to consult with businesses, and obviously resource from a finance point of view is very important at the moment, and it's about managing that, not just here in policies and strategies, but also going forward for the businesses. Because our officers will be going out, talking to these businesses, they will be able to find out a lot of this anyway. But as a draft going out to the community, it's about making sure that we do come out with true consultation and allowing that feedback to come back to us, and then allowing us to make the decisions going forward from that, because that's what this is about. Further with this is, I know Councillor Garotti was probably a bit nice about it, but this is a 2-year process to get to here. So that's a big thing for a strategy. And once a strategy is in, it normally is a rinse and repeat with fine tuning. So it's taken us a while to get here, and I think it's about making sure that gets into place and actually starts some traction for the businesses that are in the Banyule Council. So looking forward to this going out. Thank you.
Do we have any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Neely.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm particularly interested in how we sustain economic growth in our country, let alone just Banyule. And this strategy is for the next 5 years. It's to expedite the right work with the right people to enable the right job generation in our municipality. And that's like a really, really quick summary of what this is all about. But that is really key work. And, the end goal is to improve our livability and to provide more local jobs. So I endorse this report. Thank you.
Do we have any other councillors? No? Would you like a right of reply, councillor? No? All right, and then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move to item 8.2, Rosanna Station Kiosk Social Enterprise Partnership. There are no speakers to this item. Councillors, there is an officer's report before you, as set out in the agenda papers. Do I have a councillor to move that motion? Councillor Melican, seconded by Councillor McKern. Councillor Melican, would you like to speak?
Just a few comments. Yeah, I'd like to thank Youth Projects for their initiative and their work in running the Little Social, and unfortunately their business model didn't quite match the requirements or the needs in the community, and they've decided to cease operations, and I'd like to welcome now and not yet as the new partner who seem to have a slightly different business model, which I hope will be successful. Because, as the previous speaker spoke about the last item about our unemployment, and, this is a social enterprise that council has stimulated through an arrangement we have with Metro Trains. And it's all about providing local opportunities for local people who find barriers to work, and that's very important. So I wish them all the best with their endeavours, and looking forward to having a coffee. I remember when Youth Projects launched the original thing, it was a very happy, and speaking to their CEO, he talked about the many sites they run and the success the programs have had over the years. So it's disappointing that it wasn't as successful as it could have been, but I'm really looking forward to the new company taking over, and really hoping that it will kick off and be a real boom in Rosanna. So happy to support this tonight.
Thank you, councillor. Would the seconder like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably on a broader perspective in relation to social enterprise kiosks, because they seem to be increasing in number in our municipality. We do have a social enterprise scheme happening here at Ivanhoe Library in the cafe, and also at the Belfield Community Hub. Through you, Mayor, I'm just wondering if the Director of Community Services might like to comment on the proliferation of social enterprise cafes. How many do we currently have, Ms Brackett, and where do you think we're heading with it all?
Thank you, Councillor. I might take the number on notice, but top of my head there's 4 that we either are in partnership with or are supporting, but I'll come back and confirm that. There's definitely a growth and interest in social enterprise cafes. I think, one, because this council's provided a lot of support in terms of infrastructure and grants and understanding the startup required. Also, they're a well-tested business model now, like people actually understand how the model actually works, and they've got very good measurable outcomes supporting people, either young people, people with disabilities, people who've got other kind of barriers to employment. And I think the community in Banyule overall actually is quite willing to spend their money to get a cup of coffee and also achieve some social good as well. So there's a lot of motivation in the Banyule community about the social benefit of the spend as well. So yes.
Thank you. Thanks for that feedback, Ms Brackett. I've spoken to a number of employees at the Ivanhoe Cafe, and all of them have reported building confidence and skill sets, and that the experience has been remarkably worthwhile. So terrific program, and I'm delighted that Banyule is involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers to the item? Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to thank Kath Brackett, the Director of Community Wellbeing, and her team to bring them in, and really good analysis in the report and the process. Well done, and thank you for finding a good new operator for that social enterprise. And I just wonder, how we go about just promoting these a little bit better to our community and branding, so that Banyule people know that it's a social enterprise. But that's something we can reflect on. And again, thank you to Kath and the team, because I think this is a very good outcome for the council.
Thank you, councillor. Any other Councillors? No. I will then now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We now move on to notices of motion. There are nil. Moving on to item 10, general business. We have a number of councillors that wish to raise general business this evening. Councillor McKern, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is always a fun part of the evening, sharing with our constituents and fellow councillors some of the activities and events that we've been involved in as councillors leading up to the council meeting. So recently, council had its annual strategic planning day on Sunday the 19th of February, starting at 8:30 a.m. All councillors and the executive management team were here at Ivanhoe till about 7 p.m. to discuss strategic planning for our city's future. And I'd like to thank the councillor group for their engagement and participation. As I said, all councillors were in attendance, and the officers too. Thank you for your time and efforts preparing the papers of the day. As a treat, at the end of a very long and intensive day, councillors were invited to climb the stairs of the tower and view the surrounding panorama from the Ivanhoe Clock Tower. Now, I must say it was a real treat. The long-range views, I mean, we could see all the way to Paran, aside from the city skyline. And I have a photograph here, and you might just scrunch that down a little if it's okay, from our comms team, that I took from the tower looking east-southeast. And you'll see in the photograph on the right, Ivanhoe Girls Grammar figures quite prominently there. You've got Upper Heidelberg Road and Knoll Street taking off with St James Anglican Church to the right. But I located a photograph just to the left of the February photo I took, taken in 1937, when the clock tower was first built. And isn't it interesting to notice the difference? For a start, Ivanhoe Girls Grammar was still a fledgling, having started in 1903, and just look how much of that open space has been consumed. But remarkably, looking further afield to the southeast, all the open paddocks, which are now, of course, built over. But what struck me the most, and we've had a lot of discussion around canopy trees and the need for more canopy, is that looking at the images, we have a lot more canopy than we did in 1937. So that's something to reflect upon, how much our canopy has actually increased, not decreased over the years. So that's item number one. And I just thought I'd raise people's attention, and this is item 2, so perhaps instead of the beeper going off, this is the second item. Last week, the Urban Food Strategy Community Reference Group had its third meeting, and it's been a wonderful group of really enthusiastic, engaged locals contributing to that strategy. Prior to it, though, we enjoyed a tour of Banyul's Urban Farm, which is in Belfield, just next door to the Belfield Community Hub. It sits behind the Waratah Special Development School. Patrick, who's on our community reference group, ran the tour, and he's one of 5 farmers who runs this not-for-profit organic veggie farm that is open to the public every Friday from 10 to 5, farm gate open to buy organic fresh fruit and veggies, or if you'd like a veggie box, you can subscribe. Just Google Urban, Urban Raiser, I think they call themselves. Farm Raiser, or you can drop me a line and I can send you a link. But it's one of Banyul's hidden gems, the Farm Raiser, and I think it deserves a lot more profile. And that's about it for me in general business. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. That's a short one for you tonight. Over to you, Alison.
Thanks, Mayor. Greensborough Historical Society hosted their long time coming launch of their book Memories of the Shire of Diamond Valley, 1964 to 1994. So this was compiled by our regular guest of our council meetings, Rosie Bray, and contributed to by many passionate and long-time residents. The launch was held at Green Hills Neighbourhood House on Saturday afternoon. It was a full house with many locals keen to purchase the final works. Also present was Minister Colin Brooks, State Member for Bundoora, who presented Rosie with a small gift of gratitude for her considerable efforts in bringing this edition to life. Many thanks also goes to Liz Pigeon, the Yarra Plenty Regional Library historian in the Diamond Valley there, for providing local knowledge support through access to records. So thank you to everyone who contributed all their experiences, their photographs, their memories and their time to create this tangible history of our home for future generations. You can actually buy this book. The compilation retails for $25 and can be purchased through the Greensborough Historical Society. If you need us to connect you with them, we can do that. Just get in touch. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. We now move on to Councillor Tom Melican. Would you please like to...
I submitted a general item about the exact same item, so I was...
All right.
I was a bit more expansive, and I was going to actually say hello to Rosie Bray, who's recovering from an injury, and she did a fantastic job to actually finish the book and attend the launch. So I'd just like to give a shout out to Rosie, very deeply involved in this council, but also Heidelberg Council and also the Shire of Diamond Valley. So, and I was just reflecting, looking at the book. The decisions they made back in the Shire of Diamond Valley have led to the amenity and the area we enjoy today. And the Shire of Diamond Valley was actually the North Ward of Heidelberg Council originally, and it was sectioned off and became the Shire of Diamond Valley, and then 30 years later came back to be part of the city of Banyule. So it's been up and down a bit. So fascinating, and really like to thank Rosie for her efforts and her friendship, and I hope she's back here sitting in the chamber very shortly and enjoying council meetings like we all do.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other councillors that have another business?
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, there is one additional thing I'd like to mention.
Okay, councillor.
General business is a great opportunity to share events, as I mentioned earlier. Councillor Champion just gave us some wonderful information that I had no idea about, so thank you, Councillor Champion, for sharing that. But I also want to put the call out to our community. If there are items that you feel councillors could be talking to or making known to our public in general business, reach out to us, let us know, call us, email us, and we'll look to accommodate your general business items. So thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. We'll have to check with governance if that's an appropriate thing to do. Now, I've got one item as well, if no one else has one. The sports forum that was held on the 22nd of February and was very well attended and enjoyed by all. Thank you to all the team that brought the event together. It was the biggest event yet, with over 70 presidents and volunteers from Banyule's sporting clubs, and was a continuation of our sporting club survey. Experts in the field covered a range of areas to help us progress the experience of all those involved with the clubs. Important areas of conversation were volunteer support and inclusivity to welcome all of our community. This is a key area helping to increase the well-being and resilience of our community. This was a much-loved event, and with this much interest, I imagine we have a great future ahead here in Banyule in our sporting community. That now finalises that general business items for tonight, and we move on to public questions. We have received one public question. I now request Council's Director of Corporate Services, Mark Giglio, to read out the questions, and directors to read out the council's response. The public question will be included in the minutes of this meeting. The minutes will be available on our website later this week.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question tonight from Roger Fife of Ivanhoe. And the question reads, Council has several policies that deal with affordable housing and availability of properties for rental. Does Council have a register of properties in residential streets that are available for short-term rentals, and is there a fee for appearing on the register? I'd like to refer that question to Kath Brackett, the Director of Community Wellbeing.
Thank you. The answer, Banyule City Council is working with key government agencies and community organisations to seek solution to the affordable housing issues that are of concern right across Victoria. We are also currently working on the development of an affordable housing strategy that will consider all potential options that may assist with housing and rental shortages. At this point in time, however, Council does not have a register of short-term stay properties across the municipality or its impact on housing availability, but this may be considered as part of the strategy development as it progresses.
Thank you. We now move on to the final item on the agenda, the closure of the meeting. In accordance with section 66(2)(a) and the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting will now be closed to members of the public for the consideration of 2 confidential matters. Can I please have a councillor move and second the council for council to close the meeting to members of the public prior to considering confidential items? Hang on, councillors. 11.1, Banyule Strategic Sites, directions to proceed. And 11.2, Strategic Sites Homes Victoria business case. Items 11.1 and 2 have been designated as confidential pursuant to S31A of the Local Government Act 2020, as information within the report relates council business information, being information would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, and S31G of the Local Government Act, as the information within the report contains information relating to commercial information, being information provided by a business, commercial or financial undertaking, and relates to either trade secrets, and if released prematurely could unreasonably expose the business, commercial or financial undertakings to disadvantage. I now seek a mover and seconder. Councillor Neely, second by Councillor Mitsonikos. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. The next ordinary meeting of Council will be held on Monday the 20th of March 2023. I now close the meeting to the public at 10:36. Thank you for your attendance.